boy woke up drowning in a toilet, but in reality he was once one of the greatest heroes of humanity. His name was Cashin Lee. In the past, he destroyed villains as if they were nothing until the day he was betrayed by the very people he trusted. When he opened his eyes again, he woke up inside a school bathroom toilet. The students around him were laughing, saying he was the shame of the school. Cashin had reincarnated in the body of a student destined to become the greatest villain. When he looked in the mirror, he realized that was not his face. But now he possesses something even more dangerous, the destructive spirit of Moros, which unleashes an absurd power within his body in a bustling city. The news reports that in response to yesterday's robbery on South Avenue, the use of force against criminals will be increased. The Human Rights Commission has created an official petition demanding that Lampas, the international hero organization, hold Cashin accountable for his violence. At the Lampas office, Washington branch, Tuppenschiller, the S-rank light mage, asks if Cashin is a villain. The protagonist crushes his cup and says it's cruel for the director to ask if he's a villain. Tuppence asks if he could show some remorse. Because he ignored the plan and acted on his own, Ralph escaped and the public has turned against them. Cashin says he got his hands on the hostages, but Tuppence tells him to be careful. After all, the well-being of the hostages being the top priority is a basic principle. The protagonist replies that he was confident he could rescue them. Tuppence adds that if he thinks he's a hero, he must act like one and think calmly and rationally. Believing you're right doesn't make you right. Your actions were no different from a villain's. Cashin closes one eye and thinks about it. Tuppence warns him that he'll be on probation and knows what will happen if he causes any trouble. Outside, Cashin complains that she lives up to her nickname, the Witch of the Steel Tower. He wonders how she and Jeff ever became best friends, and he needs to find a way to get the hell out of this place. Just then, his friend Jeff calls him. Cashin asks what's up. He's surprised and asks where the place is, complaining that Rhodes is in Greece at Rhodes International Airport somewhere in the city. Cashin sips his coffee, commenting that thanks to Jeff, he gets to visit this magnificent place. He wonders how long it's been since they last saw each other. Maybe half a year? Then he starts to reminisce. Back in the past, at the HC orphanage, Cashin is amazed by some clay toys saying they're moving. He asks if they're alive. Jeff says no. They're just dolls moving with his power. Cashin asks if he's going to become a hero who beats up villains and appears on TV, but the boy says he's not sure since his powers are too simple. The protagonist says his powers were actually really cool. He wonders if that was 2 years ago after he was sent for adoption in the US. Those were peaceful times in his life. He finishes his coffee. As time passes, the coffee shop empties out. The protagonist checks the time on his phone and says he's late. He also hasn't picked up. He wonders what happened. Just then, Jeff appears behind him and calls his name. The protagonist turns around quickly, coming face to face with his injured friend. He asks what happened and if he was fighting a villain. Jeff says he shouldn't have called him here. Cashin asks what he's talking about. The blonde man tells him to take this and hands him a necklace, but the protagonist complains that's not what matters right now. He's badly hurt, but Jeff says he's fine, spitting up a lot of blood right after he finishes speaking. Cashin notices this immediately. Jeff warns him there's no time to explain. He needs to get out of there as fast as possible or he'll be in danger too. Cashin tells him to hang on. He's gonna call an ambulance, but he senses someone has arrived. Wondering who's holding the sword, Jeff shoves the protagonist away. Then he turns around as the shadowy figure advances, slicing through Jeff with a single draw of the sword, completely severing his head from his body. Cashin watches in horror as blood flies everywhere. Then he screams for his friend as his head falls to the floor. The young man drops to his knees and starts calling for Jeff, but the killer leaps onto a building. The protagonist grinds his teeth, telling him to stop right there. The chase continues until they reach the sea. Cashin gasps for breath as he reaches the rocks. He then asks what this bastard has against him or if it was a client's request. Not that it mattered now. Cashin activates his fire ability and says he'll burn him with his own hands. The killer says he's as rude as ever. However, the protagonist is surprised to be recognized. It was Jack Khaled, an S-rank knight. Cashin demands to know how that bastard could do that to Jeff. Jack states that he was simply dealing with a traitor to their organization. The protagonist asks what nonsense he's spouting, and a woman approaches from behind saying it's true. Jeff had taken a comrade's life. Lara, an S-rank ice mage, says that besides having witnesses, they also have evidence and the chief executives have confirmed it. Jack warns that Cashin is also on the list of suspected traitors. He will have to tell them everything about his conversations with Jeff, staring coldly at the protagonist. Cashin quickly analyzes the situation, sighing as he sees he has no way out. Then he comments that during his years as a hero, Jeff never took anyone's life. Lara warns that besides them, there are 2 other high-class heroes, and she hopes he won't make any rash decisions. Jack continues that if he considers himself a hero, he should think and act rationally, as this is his final warning. Cashin breaks into a smile, saying that he's absolutely right. He should behave like a calm and rational hero, but he'll take his life first. Then he lunges forward with flaming fists. Jack quickly draws his sword. He attempts a few slashes as Cashin closes in with a fighting stance, landing a punch to his opponent's chest. Jack leaps back, channeling energy into his sword, and then creating other imaginary katanas to counterattack. Lyra also prepares her freezing blast. Cashin yells for them to bring it on. They both attack, but the protagonist turns and deflects the blows. He then rushes forward until he's hit by something in the abdomen. Cashin falls to his knees. He wonders if there was a sniper among the other heroes. Lyra tells Cashin to surrender because if he keeps resisting, they'll aim for his head. But the protagonist ignites another ember, telling them to go to hell. Jack notices this immediately, but Cashin hurls the flame and tells him to take this. That was hellfire, and it hits the 2S rank heroes. Cashin tries to run, thinking this sucks. He'll deal with these bastards later, and so he jumps into the water. But his heart is struck by a bullet. The protagonist suddenly starts to fall, muttering, "Damn it," and so his body plunges into the water. Cashin reflects that he never imagined he'd lose his life so easily. He just wanted a chance for revenge. The necklace Jeff gave him begins to glow in a bathroom somewhere else. Some students turn on the faucet, complaining what a pain. That damn guy in the toilet stall isn't breathing. They wonder if he's dead, so they decide to run, but the body starts to breathe. Cashin slowly starts to move. Then he lifts his head out of the water. He gasps for air, trying to recover. He wonders what happened as the necklace glows. This wasn't his body. He wonders where he is. He fell off a cliff and ended up here. But besides that, something was wrong with his voice. He looks at himself in the mirror. Cashin is completely shocked. He asks himself if this is him. It doesn't even make sense. He wants to know why he turned into this pretty boy and what happened to his own body. This has to be a dream, but the boy uses the water to slick his hair back, thinking this is crap. This is really not a dream. Cashin wonders what the hell is going on. But suddenly, he feels a sharp pain in his head, acquiring all the memories of this body, a Korean named Kwon Kong-woo. Cashin wonders how the hell this happened and what these strange memories mean, but a voice says that Cashin has awakened. The protagonist turns, asking who's there. The necklace begins to emanate a dark energy and materializes in front of him, introducing itself as Moros, a splendid soul from a distant time. Kong-woo is surprised, wanting to know what it is since it came out of the necklace, but Moros just repeats its name. More importantly, it's sure that he has many questions, asking if he would like the answers. Elsewhere, Kong-woo summarizes what it was saying, that it brought him back from hell. Moros replies that it has failed many times. It also notes that he's good at Korean. So Cashin explains he lived in Korea before, sighing and thinking, damn it, he lost his life and then came back. He wonders how any of this makes sense. Moros asks if it was Jeff who gave it to him since it was meant to protect him. Cashin thinks about protecting. Come to think of it, what Jeff said back then was something similar. The young man takes a deep breath. He wants to know what Jeff was looking for since he said it was some kind sword scrap. Moros replies that it was the Sword of Annihilation, marked. That sword was forged centuries ago during the wars of the mythical age. Cashin asks how he could know that since it happened so long ago. Moros replies that it was a splendid soul and that he should listen to the story. Kong-woo gets annoyed by this. He asks how he's supposed to believe anything he says, and Moros tells him to look at his phone. Kong-woo questions the whole sacrificed himself part, finding that hard to believe as well, but he gets angry when he sees something. He wonders what the hell this is, with news reports saying Cashin is deceased and that Jeff lost his life fighting him. Kong-woo questions if they're saying he was the one who took Jeff's life. Then he starts shaking, phone in hand, muttering that this is all bullshit, not a word of truth. Kong-woo starts grinding his teeth. He yells that those bastards from Lampus dared to frame him. Instead of protecting an innocent person, they're pinning the blame on him. Moros tells Cashin to calm down because the way he is now, but the protagonist's hair changes. His eyes turn different colors. He wonders how they could do this as his power activates. Claws replace his hands. Kangwoo notices this instantly, wondering what this is and what the hell is happening. Elsewhere in the school, the delinquents wonder why that damn guy is taking so long, but he'll be here soon. A chubby kid runs towards them. The purple-haired one says to look at the way that pig, and the blonde one comments that it's pathetic. They ask if he went to check, and the chubby kid confirms it. There was no one in the bathroom. The nerd asks if he checked properly. What about the police and the ambulance? But the chubby kid says he didn't see any of them. The delinquents ask what the hell is going on. He said that bastard had gone to hell since he wasn't breathing. The nerd thinks to himself that he definitely wasn't breathing earlier, but a purple-haired delinquent says he can leave. The blonde one yells that he almost had a heart attack over this shit and that retard must have been exaggerating. Then the purple-haired one says that's enough. Everything's fine since he didn't die. The blonde one asks what he's going to do about him. Then their leader asks what he thinks because he's going to find that bastard and finish him off again. The protagonist runs to the rooftop and Moros asks if he went there to avoid being seen. That was good judgment on Cashin's part, but the protagonist yells that he's the one who did this shit, so he better explain why he turned into a villain. Moros complains about his temper and explains that because he came back to life when he shouldn't have, the balance of fate became distorted. Originally, the owner of this body was destined to survive and become a catastrophe-class villain in the future. Cashin tells him to wait, repeating the words catastrophe class, so he inherited his damned fate. Moros confirms it. The protagonist bursts out laughing at this because now he, a first-class hero, has been reduced to a villain and a catastrophe class one at that. Then he punches the wall complaining because he doesn't like the idea of being a villain. Kangwoo thinks for a few minutes, his hands on his face, but Moro says he must live. If Jeff were here, he would have said the same thing. Before they met, Jeff told him he regretted getting him into this. Even though he knew his end was near, he made no plans for his own survival. Instead, he saved his only chance of survival and left it for him. So Kangwoo mustn't let his choice be in vain. Besides, Moros calls his name. He needs to calm down like he's doing now, but Kangwoo complains that it's annoying taking orders. Moros says he needs to calm down to turn back into a human, and the boy decides to do it. A few minutes later, he calls for Moros, who answers with his name. But Kangwoo wants to know what exactly he is. Moros asks if he's interested, and the protagonist confirms it. Because if he's powerful enough to revive him, that's enough for him. But Moros says that after he finds the Sword of Annihilation, he will find out naturally. Kangwoo says that maybe that junk sword is connected to Jeff's murder. Moros replies that he thinks so. But suddenly, someone calls the protagonist a loser. They approach while laughing at the situation. The purple-haired one says he's glad he's still alive in the main school building. The girls look down the hallway amazed, saying it's the first time they've seen someone as handsome as him. It's Kim Woo-chan, a fighter-class hero apprentice. The young man walks calmly until his cell phone starts to ring. He answers the call and asks what Sunbae Lee Dae-woong needs. They then start to discuss the matter until Kang Woo-chan notices something through the window. He begins to analyze the situation, saying he'll call his Sunbae back soon. The protagonist stands in front of the three delinquents. Cashin starts to analyze the situation, remembering who these guys were. Moros tells him not to worry because no one except him can see him. The blonde one says he's speechless because every time he thinks about how he had distress over this retard, but their leader says that Kangwoo is more clueless than ever. If he didn't die, he should have reported it immediately since no one gave him permission to sneak in and hide. But Kangwoo just asks if he's done barking. He's feeling very annoyed right now. After all, he's not interested in beating up brats, but he thinks they need a good thrashing. Moros warns that even without transforming, villains still have physical abilities that exceed normal humans. It would be better for him to hold back or he might kill them. Kangwoo says he knows that very well. The blonde one puts his hands in his pockets and approaches, asking what he's muttering about and if getting beaten has made him crazy. Kangwoo looks him straight in the eye, and this irritates the delinquent. He goes to hit him, asking where he's looking. However, in return, he gets a solid punch to the face. Kangwoo knocked out the blonde with a single blow. His friends are stunned by the scene, but the protagonist remains unshaken in his fighting stance. The blonde immediately falls to the ground. The purple-haired one wonders what the hell that was and what this loser just did. But the nerd runs towards him, yelling for Kong Wu to go to hell. The protagonist just looks at him, running towards him very quickly. He then blocks the bat with his arm and counters with a direct punch, which knocks out another one with extreme ease. The purple-haired one even drops his cigarette in shock, thinking that the loser took out 2 of his friends with 1 punch each. Kong Wu raises his gaze towards him, asking if he's ever felt guilty for bullying people. And why isn't he answering his question? But the leader just flashes a wicked smile, asking what guilt is because he's getting sick of seeing a loser like him posturing like that. He thinks he's a big shot after taking down the small fry. Kong Wu just says he doesn't seem to feel any guilt at all. In that case, he needs a beating because he's sure that after that, he'll feel something. The scene on the rooftop begins to unfold. Kong Wu charges towards his opponent at full speed. The purple-haired one is surprised by this and gets into a fighting stance. He then runs towards him for a confrontation, but Cashin just dodges his punch by ducking his body. Then he lands an uppercut on the delinquent's chin with extreme ease. He starts to fall backward, but the protagonist moves again to land another blow, hitting the delinquent in the stomach this time. He starts to spit up blood from the impact, kneeling from just that one hit. Cashin stares at him with a cold expression on his face, asking if he feels guilty yet, but the delinquent tells him to fuck off. The protagonist warns that he held back, but maybe that wasn't enough for him. So he thinks he needs to beat him up a little more. The delinquent is terrified by that sentence. Wu-chan appears on the rooftop asking if he doesn't think that's enough. Leaves fall towards the hero apprentice. The delinquent trembles with fear upon recognizing him. Kong Wu asks who he is and why he's meddling in someone else's fight. Wu-chan asks what he gained by beating someone who is no match for him. The delinquent's ego is bruised upon hearing this. He then calls him a bastard while grinding his teeth, charging towards the protagonist with a punch. But Kong Wu just pivots his foot, striking the delinquent with a kick. The delinquent goes flying backward. Wu-chan grabs his shoulder, repeating that it's enough, but the protagonist gives him a cold stare, and the hero is impressed. Kong Wu attempts an elbow strike on him, but is surprised to see it has been blocked. He throws another straight punch, but the apprentice hero dodges. Kong Wu quickly notices something. Wu-chan shifts his foot, aiming for a high kick that the protagonist avoids by ducking. He's fast, he thinks. Moros then calls out to Cashin, telling him the guy is a hero and it would be dangerous to fight him in his current state. Wu-chan lunges forward with another punch. Kong Wu manages to dodge, but blood splatters from his face. A few seconds later on the rooftop, both are facing each other in their fighting stances. Kong Wu glares at him coldly, wondering if this guy is really a hero. Wu-chan assesses the situation, suggesting they should stop since neither would gain anything from continuing this fight. The protagonist is surprised. The apprentice hero holds out a bandage, telling him his face is hurt. They look at each other with hostility. Then Kong Wu snatches the bandage and walks off, ignoring everything else. Wu-chan watches him go, thinking it was 3 against 1, and he never knew someone like him went to his school. But then he looks down, noticing his own arm is injured. Elsewhere at a PC cafe, Cashin finds he can't access the Lampus website. It seems his member ID has expired. He had a feeling this would happen, but it's still incredibly annoying. Later, in another part of the city, Cashin quickly calls out to Moros. He wants to know how he knew Wu-chan was a hero. Moros asks if he means the guy from the rooftop. When you made contact with him, I could tell the moment you were touched. Cashin remarks that it's a useful skill, but Moros brushes it off as nothing special. He explains that if Cashin uses the Eye of Appraisal, he can get more detailed information. Cashin asks how he knows about that. Moros explains he's a noble soul who investigates the world's knowledge and suggests that Cashin should become a villain now. Cashin thinks for a moment. Moros can tell he doesn't want to, and Cashin confirms it, but he's going to try anyway. Since he has nothing to trust but this villain power, he asks what he needs to do. Moros explains it's similar to losing control over one's desires and emotions. The protagonist comments that it sounds complicated. The soul clarifies that in Cashin's case, anger appears to be the trigger. Anger, Cashin repeats. He remembers everything that happened to him and Jeff. Then he lets out a furious scream, yelling that he'll take the life of every last bastard at Lampus. Moros asks what he's doing. Cashin says he's getting angry, but the soul tells him he doesn't need to scream. He just has to picture it in his head. The protagonist complains, "Why didn't you say so sooner?" In another part of the city, inside a car, a man relays information. The villain known as Blaster is a lunatic who loves to blow things up and admire his own handiwork. Apparently, he entered the country illegally through the Incheon port and was sighted this afternoon in the Gadam district. Wu Chan adds that Blaster already has 102 victims, and that's more than enough. His boss, Lee Dae-woong, a B-rank knight, pulls out a piece of bread. He adds that Blaster's combat skills aren't special, but his ability to create explosives is problematic. He also has a terrible personality with a few screws loose. Wu Chun chimes in, saying the only answer for a villain is annihilation. They're nothing but antisocial criminals who can't control their desires and emotions, so they must be pulled out by the roots before they can act. Dae-wong remarks that he sounds a bit scary when he talks about villains. Wu Chan replies that a hero's duty is to pursue justice. He only stated what must be done. Dae-wong smiles, telling him he'll be the one to worry about the pursuit of justice and the young apprentice should just focus on helping out. Wu Chan looks at him in silence. Back in the same alley, a system window appears before Cashin. Moros explains it's the status window as seen through the eye of appraisal. The protagonist remarks that it looks like a game. He asks about Shadow Blade and Self-Heal, and Moros clarifies these are the abilities he can currently use. Thanks to Self-Heal, the cut on his face is already recovering quickly. Cashin asks if his limbs would grow back if severed. Moros says they likely would as the ability is limited only by his amount of mana. The hidden powers are abilities he hasn't manifested yet, which will unlock as he gets stronger. Cashin complains about only having 300 mana points since he used to have over 1,500 when he was a hero. For a catastrophe class, that seems pretty weak. Moros clarifies that the class refers to his potential. Cashin should know the saying about a diamond in the rough. Whether he stays a rock or becomes a diamond depends on his hard work. The protagonist asks if he can use this skill on other people. Moros confirms it, but it can only be used 3 times a day. He notes that Cashin got exhausted after using it on Jeff and slept for half a day. Cashin mulls over the implications. Moros suggests they test his main skills. The protagonist asks what to do, wondering if he needs to shout the name like in a game. Moros tells him to just picture the Shadow Blade in his mind. Like this, Cashin asks, swiping his claw. A blade immediately forms on the ground. He notes that it worked, surprising Moros. The protagonist mentions he can actually touch what came out of the shadow. For something made of shadow, it's as sharp as a knife. Moros reflects that he expected it to take a full day for Cashin to use his skills, never imagining he'd grasp it instantly. He wonders if Jeff saw this potential in him all along. Cashin comments that the blade is hard enough to be used as a shield. Moros then mentions that as a villain, he should be able to create his own clothes. Cashin says he knows, but it's not urgent, and he's fine for now. Your fashion sense is awful, Moros retorts. Shut up, Cashin replies. As the day ends, with the sun setting, Moros asks where he's going. Home, Cashin replies, surprising the ghost. He explains that Kongwoo has a family. His parents aren't around, but he lives with his older sister, his Nuna, who's an office worker. Moros asks if he's planning to see her, and Cashin confirms. He might be destined to become a catastrophe-class villain, but he seems to care deeply for her. Moros asks if he feels guilty. He lost his life because of me when he shouldn't have, Cashin says. Suddenly, an explosion rips through the air. The protagonist spins around to see people fleeing from that direction. He's stunned. A nearby building is being rocked by explosions. People are screaming that it's a villain, that it's all over the news and social media. They're shouting that he's captured a mother and child. He's taken hostages, Cashin thinks, glaring angrily toward the top of the building. Moros is taken aback by his reaction. He yells for Cashin to wait, but the protagonist is already running toward the building. Moros warns him that he's facing a true villain on a whole other level than the thugs from earlier. Their powers far exceed normal human abilities. Then I'll just have to become a villain, Cashin declares. Moros reminds him it's an unwritten rule that villains don't fight each other. As a former hero, he should know this. Unless there's a personal grudge or a special motive for revenge, if he interferes as another villain, he'd be stepping on someone else's turf. This would make him public enemy number 1 among villains even before he gets his chance to confront Lempas. The protagonist suddenly stops right in front of the crumbling building. I'm fine with that, Cashin says. Moros is stunned. He tries to tell him he can't be acting out of a hero's sense of duty. Cashin says it has nothing to do with being a hero. But there are hostages, a mother, and her child. It would be one thing if I didn't know. But now that I do, doing nothing is just plain wrong. Moros thinks about this, remembering Jeff's words. He has an explosive temper, and people call him a mad dog, but he's warmer than anyone I know on this planet. That's why I believe in him. Moros thinks to himself, I chose Cashin as his successor. If that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Cashin, transform, Moros shouts. I'll give you my full support. Back inside the burning building, a toy store lies in ruins. Broken toys and torn packaging are scattered everywhere. A mother begs Blaster, please don't do this. The villain uses his power, forming a bomb in his hand, calling him a poor thing and telling him not to cry because they were doing this for everyone's pleasure and he shouldn't be crying. So he should say X and give a big smile just like his being a C-rank bomber villain at a gas station. Wu-chan stands by the car thinking. He rolled up his sleeve and looked at the wound, thinking that his guard was down, but still, he doesn't even know the name of the one who hurt him, but he answers his phone, introducing himself, and then he's surprised by it. On the other end, Dae-woong answers a call. He apologizes, saying he's working now and they'll go out to eat next time. He says she's the only one in his heart and he's on his way, while Wu-chan reports that he was in the bathroom but just got back. Announcing they have an order to mobilize, Blaster has appeared in the city. The villain asks if the boy has ever watched 5-colored fireworks exploding high in the night sky, but the boy says no. Blaster says he can't believe he's never seen such a beautiful sight, calling it a tragedy. But he doesn't need to be so sad because he's going to show him things even more beautiful because the flesh and blood of his beloved mother will explode along with the fireworks. He was starting to tingle with an excitement he couldn't describe, wondering if he should start with both arms, then the legs since he needs to save the head as a souvenir so the neck and chest last longer. But suddenly, the lights in the room go out. The villain gets annoyed, but then he grins, saying they have guests and he is welcome because there's no need to be shy. He should just show himself using his power. Cashin appears behind him, shattering the window. Blaster spins around very quickly, but only meets a fist getting thrown far away. Smoke begins to rise from the impact. The protagonist just stares at him coldly. He asks about the hostages, and Moro says they're both fine, but a bomb was strapped to Cashin's body. It starts to detonate. Everyone in the room is shocked. Cashin just runs as far away as he can. Outside the building, everything was normal, but then it explodes, sending debris flying. People outside ask when the police and heroes will arrive. Everything is destroyed more than usual. Blaster says he just barges in without knocking. He doesn't know who that bastard was, but he was clearly a thoughtless and rude person. So he would have made a fabulous piece of firework. But unfortunately, he lost his life too soon. But don't worry, because in his place, they will become the stars of the show tonight. Using his power, a sphere of energy begins to form, but he stopped immediately. Blood splatters on the villain's face. As his hand is severed by a dark blade, Blaster panics. But the protagonist lunges from behind him, grabbing the collar of his shirt and then slams him into the ground, shattering it. The dust begins to settle. Blaster says he knew it would be like this and tries to use his power. But Cashin grabs his wrist, asking if he thought he'd fall for the same trick twice. Then he calls him a bastard and readies his fist, punching and breaking the villain's face. The building shakes from the impact. Cashin continues the barrage of blows without stopping, causing everything around them to be destroyed. He just thinks about hitting him more and more. Moro starts calling Cashin's name. The protagonist was out of control, but the soul calls to him one more time. The protagonist then regains his control. Moro says he finally listened. Cashin becomes aware of his actions, wondering what the hell he had done, and then he looks at his blood-covered hand. Moro says he was in an uncontrollable frenzy just now. His emotions went wild and overwhelmed his reason. If he hadn't regained his senses, he would have become a lunatic concerned only with fulfilling his own desires. Cashin thinks that this sucks as he puts a hand to his eye, but he suddenly feels a sharp pain. Moros asks if he's okay and recalls the earlier explosion, but Cashin replies that he's fine and they should take care of the hostages first. He approaches them standing in front the two. Cashin notices something strange. The mother and son were trembling in fear of him. A few hours later, the police arrive, collecting Blaster's body. Dae-woong confirms that the mother and child who were taken hostage are safe. They'll need to investigate further, but for now, it looks like a territory dispute between villains. According to witnesses, it was an unidentified villain. Wu-chan looks at a toy on the floor, thinking that they kidnapped a child. Going to hell was the only answer for these villains. Some officers comment that a villain saved the hostages, and there were many witnesses. Wu-chan apologizes for interrupting them, but says that what they were discussing shouldn't be told to anyone. Dae-wong then calls the young man over, telling him to secure the footage from the first-floor staff room as he'll be there soon. The apprentice understands. He looks at the teddy bear and then leaves it on the ground in another corner of the city. Cashin looks up at the sky, somewhat sad, remembering the mother and son begging for help as they looked at him. He puts his hands on his face. Moros asks if something is bothering him, but Cashin remains silent, but then says that if it weren't for his help, he would have become a lunatic just like Blaster. And Moros confirms it. Then the protagonist looks up, thinking that he really is a villain. Suddenly, a message arrives on his phone. He begins to read it. Moros asks who it is, and Cashin says it's Kong Wu's sister, letting him know dinner is ready and he should come home to eat. The spirit asks if he's going, but the protagonist's stomach growls with hunger at the building where the fight took place. Dae-woong is stunned when he sees the video, wondering who the hell he is and if there's something wrong with his eyes because no matter how he looks at it, the villain was saving hostages, wondering if it was some kind of hidden camera prank. Wu-chan watches with apprehension in his apartment building. Inside room 701, Cashin stands in front of the food and a note. He carefully picks up the note. It told him to heat the rice and stir-fry in the microwave to eat and that she also bought fruit and put it in the fridge. She tried cooking today and signed the note as the cutest sister in the world. Cashin remembers when he was a child at the orphanage and a woman told him he was late. No food for children who don't show up for dinner on time until a piece of bread appears in front of Cashin. Cashin calls out to Jeff and the boy tells him to eat it and not let the director catch him. So the protagonist eats it happily. He stares at the note fondly, setting the food on the table and sitting down in a kitchen chair. Cashin picks up a spoonful and brings it to his mouth. He comments that it's delicious and it's been a long time since he's eaten food someone else made for him. So he gives thanks for the meal. The next day finally arrives. Cashin was sleeping in his bed. As the alarm clock starts to ring, he slowly opens his eyes. Finally awake, he stares at the ceiling. He's in the bathroom, feeling irritated. Inside the home's bathroom, the young man brushes his teeth, thinking that this was a version of him that wasn't him. It was hard to believe he was living someone else's life. He thought he would feel better after getting some sleep, but that wasn't the case. And if he could, he would go back to the past. Moros wishes Cashin a good morning, but the protagonist says there's nothing good about it. Then he puts on his sneakers. His sister asks if he's already leaving for school. He should at least say something if he's going out. Cashin thinks it's strange to meet her like this. He wonders if he should tell her he's not her real brother, but Yuri says she almost forgot. She hands him the credit card they were talking about before. She says she'll deposit his allowance and he should spend it wisely, while the protagonist wonders where she got it from. Holding the card, he starts to remember. Some time ago, he had called his sister, asking if he could get next month's allowance early. Yuri says it's only been a week since she gave it to him. And Kong Wu says that, to be honest, he remembers the delinquents demanding his money, but he tells his sister that he lost his wallet. Yuri tells him it's okay, but only because he asked so nicely. Kong Wu thanks her. She continues, saying she'll make a credit card for him to use. Kong Wu wonders about that. Cashin reflects that he understood now. So he thanks his sister, and Yuri tells him to take good care of the card and have a nice day. But she asks him to wait a second, saying he looks different today. She notices he changed his hairstyle and looks like a completely different person. He didn't get a haircut like she asked, just changed his style. Yuri asks if he got a girlfriend, and the protagonist tells her he's heading to school later at his school. Inside the first-year classroom 3, people are wondering what happened to him, shocked by the sight. The blonde guy has a bandage on his face. He suddenly gets irritated, glaring at the girls who are staring at him. He demands to know what they're looking at and if they have something to say, thinking to himself that it's all because of that little shit. But a hand touches his shoulder, and he whips around asking what's up. Cashin is standing behind him, startling the delinquent. The protagonist then asks where his seat is. The blonde guy says it's right there, pointing while trembling with fear. Cashin places his backpack on the desk and sits down. Moros asks if he can't feel that guy's intense stare. Meanwhile, the students are talking about a villain in their neighborhood. One of them saw them fighting with his own eyes. Moros says it sounds like they're talking about him. The students keep talking, saying how scary it is, and mention a serial killer incident where the victim was a high school girl. Another one saw in the paper that they removed all her limbs and drank her blood. It was definitely a villain, and one of them was Driver. Apparently, he's the boss of the Ville Zone in the Gatam district. Cashin wonders if there's really an autonomous villain district in Gatham. The students add that Driver was conducting some kind of human experiment. I hope those villains die and rot in hell, one says while Cashin just stares at his phone. Outside in the city, a delinquent bursts out laughing saying this is hilarious. The purple-haired guy tells Dae-gu to watch his mouth. The delinquent retorts that he's acting tough after getting his ass kicked by a loser. The purple-haired one tells him not to joke around, and Dae-gu tells him to relax, putting out his cigarette on the ground. He wonders aloud if they should team up to kill that guy. The purple-haired guy says he can't just sit back and do nothing. He offers an envelope, promising to make it worth his while. Dae-gu looks pleased as a nerdy guy watches from a distance. He thinks to himself that the guy is Ki-hoon's childhood friend, but he doesn't want to get involved. Dae-gu puts his hand on Ki-hoon's shoulder, saying they're friends, and he'll scratch his itch for him. He tells him to just say the word. Should he break something of his or just kill him outright? School was already over for the day when someone asks the protagonist to wait. Woo-chan is standing in front of him. He says he doesn't know his name and asks how his injury is. Cashin points to the bandage, telling him to see for himself. Moros is surprised by this. After all, Cashin had put the bandage on his face earlier. He asks why he did that when he was already fully healed. Cashin explains that if he bumps into that guy again, he might think it's strange. Moros realizes he's already planning for the future. So the protagonist asks what he wants and if he's offering to pay his hospital bills. Woo-chan thinks for a few seconds. He suggests that instead of hospital bills, how about he does something else for him? Cashin cracks a smile saying he doesn't need that. Woo-chan asks for his name. The protagonist introduces himself as Kwon Kong-woo. Woo-chan silently repeats the name to himself. Outside the school, Cashin says that was strange. Moros asks if that hero annoyed him but gets no reply. The ghost figures he must be right since Cashin didn't answer. Cashin then explains that was Woo-chan Kim, gifted with the power of pyrokinesis. With looks and height that rival a K-pop star, he's a class A student who's never caused trouble and is considered a rising star. Moros is surprised. Cashin says that's what you find when you search him online. Moros comments that he seems to have it all and asks if Cashin is jealous. The protagonist replies that the role model the kid strives to be is none other than the man with the same abilities, the S-rank hero Cashin Lee. Moros asks if he's the young man's role model. Cashin says a star like him should be in a training academy. Just then, the ghost looks back. He realizes the delinquents are following them. These idiots just don't give up, he thinks. One of the guys asks the blonde for an update. He replies that they're tailing him unnoticed and will keep them posted. On the other side of the school, Taegu asks what he said. Ki-hoon answers that they're following him, remarking that even scumbags like them seem to keep their word. Taegu tosses his cigarette butt and asks if they should follow too before setting off with his crew. In an abandoned part of the city, Cashin continues to walk calmly, never looking back. The blonde guy thinks this is messed up. He wonders why the idiot came this way as it leads to the villain district. Suddenly, a voice calls out to the blonde. He falls to the ground, terrified. Taegu asks what the hell happened. He angrily calls him a little shit, but the blonde stammers that it wasn't what he wanted. Kai-hoon demands to know where the bastard is, and the blonde points to the side, but he realizes the protagonist has vanished. The others say there's nothing there. The blonde tries to explain he was right there a second ago, but the nerd speaks up saying he went down that alley. Then we should go find him before he gets away, one says. The blonde begs them to wait since that's the direction of the villain district. This is so messed up, he thinks, wishing the group would wait for him. However, they only end up in front of a hotel. Dae-gu demands to know where the damn guy went since it's a dead end. Ki-hoon asks if he's sure he came this way, and the nerd confirms it. But the delinquent kicks the nerd's leg, asking if he's messing with him. The guy starts to buckle in pain. Taegu accuses him of making him look like a fool. Just then, the protagonist's voice asks, "Were you looking for me?" Everyone spins around, coming face to face with Cashin. He says that if they've come to the right place. A camera watches the confrontation unfold. It captures everything from a high angle. The camera seems to be focused on Cashin's face. In a control room, a guy hums to himself as he watches the protagonist on a monitor. He jots down a few notes, then puts his feet up on the desk. Looks like he has guests, he says, back to the impending fight. Taegu remarks that the bastard doesn't even seem surprised and probably has no clue what's about to happen. He asks if he's the one who beat up Kai-hoon. Cashin gives them a cold stare. Taegu scoffs, demanding his attention. He says he'll give him 3 seconds. If he doesn't want to meet his maker, he'd better kiss his feet. He starts counting. 1, 2. When he gets to 3, Cashin doesn't even flinch. Everyone is surprised by the enraged delinquent. You really want to get hurt, Taegu sneers. Cashin calmly tells him to bring it on. The delinquent is taken aback, but before he can react, 2 fingers fly toward his face. He drops to the ground, screaming in panic about his eyes. Cashin grabs his hair and smashes his head against the wall. The others stunned to see Taegu knocked out cold. His body slumps to the ground. Why were you so close? Fucking idiot, Cashin mutters. But then Taegu's chubby underling gets enraged and charges at Cashin. However, the protagonist simply dodges to the side. The chubby guy's fist swings at him again, but Cashin dodges once more, seemingly unconcerned. The guy throws another punch, but Cashin moves behind him. As the guy turns around, he receives a low kick to the calf, dropping him to the ground. He's dazed on the floor as Cashin says, I was planning on going easy, but you guys are really getting on my nerves. He then steps on the guy's crotch. Cashin turns to the others and asks if they're just gonna stand there watching. Just then, Taegu calls them slowpokes as he staggers to his feet. He starts laughing maniacally, saying the protagonist is screwed now. Cashin wonders if he went too easy on him. Daegu raises his hands into a Muay Thai stance, revealing he was the runner-up in the National High School League. Now that loser's really done for, Kai-hoon thinks. His 2 friends are also stunned. Cashin simply stands still, facing the delinquent. In a flashback, 2 upperclassmen say it's gonna be easy, that Cashin is totally screwed until Jack asks what they're doing. The 2 of them explain that the idiot was just running a bit late, but the rookie was being polite and was just being used for training. Then Jack quickly notices something, noticing that the opponent was only hitting Cashin's guard. So he asks why he isn't wearing protection, and the sunbase says the rookie didn't need it. But that wasn't who Jack was talking about. He was talking about John. Cashin Lee was one of the graduates from the combat training agency, and they said he was the youngest person to become a top student. He was an expert in hand-to-hand combat, and there's no record of him ever losing a one-on-one fight. The sunbays are surprised because they didn't even know his ability was pyrokinesis, and he wasn't a mage. Suddenly, a loud noise is heard. All the sunbays turn around only to see Cashin knocking out John. Back in the present, Taegu slams into the wall from the force of the blow. Cashin remains standing in front of him. The other delinquents tremble in fear. Taegu tries to get up, but the protagonist grabs his face with his palm, squeezing with great force. His thoughts were that they are pathetic wannabe thugs who went wild because no one put them in their place. If their opponents were stronger, these thugs would never have dared to fight. That's true even for those idiots. And if he were stronger, then Jeff and even Kong Wu could have escaped all that crap. He will definitely become stronger and invincible to make everyone tremble in fear. Kai-hoon gets scared and tells them to leave. The blonde guy turns around saying they should get out of there until he suddenly screams in fear because a villain was flying over their fight. Driver moves his screwdriver. He's a B+ rank mechanical villain. Everyone shouts Driver's name. The villain keeps a smile on his face. Kai-hoon trembles with fear at this. Then he yells for them to run because the situation is messed up. Daegu does the same and begs them not to leave him alone. Cashin looks coldly at the villain. Driver just gives a little smirk. Moros then calls out to the protagonist, asking why he was using a screwdriver. Driver lands on the ground, asking if it isn't cool. He puts the screwdriver on his back and comments that he thought he'd lend a hand, but from the looks of it, he misread the situation. Cashin says he doesn't remember asking for help, and the villain laughs. Driver says that wasn't very nice and asks if he doesn't know who he is, but the protagonist replies that he's the screwdriver guy. The villain says that seeing him show no reaction really hurts his pride, then his screwdriver transforms into a cannon. The protagonist is surprised by this. Driver says he came to the villain's area and knows what's gonna happen now. A blast starts to come out, but it only shoots flower petals. Driver says that was pretty weird and it was a joke, bursting into laughter. But the next shot wouldn't be a joke. The protagonist remains emotionless. Then he turns to leave and Driver asks where he's going. The villain stands still, wondering if he was just ignored. On the way to his house, Moros comments that this was very dangerous. There's no way to beat the screwdriver guy right now. According to his calculations, his magic power shouldn't be inferior, but Cashin changes direction. Moros is surprised by this. The protagonist places his hands on the wall. Moros comments that it seems to have shaken him. He asks about training to face him one day, and Cashin asks if he can find him with the Eye of Wisdom. This was the perfect opportunity to fight someone stronger. For him, the best way to learn was in a real fight by putting his life on the line. So he can't let such a good opportunity pass back at that dead-end alley. Driver imitates the protagonist's kick, wondering if that's how he did it. That guy didn't have ordinary moves, and he wants to know who he was. Wasn't even scared of him. These high school kids were scary, but something approaches from behind him. Driver turns around, coming face to face with a transformed Cashin approaching. The guy is impressed by this. Cashin strikes the villain's guard with his claws. He is thrown far away. Driver becomes alert. The protagonist gathers dark energy in his claws, creating some dark blades that make Driver dodge. The villain then starts to fly. Cashin thinks that, as expected, he's good. Driver spins the tool in his hand using summon weapon and enlarging his screwdriver. Moros warns him to be careful because he summoned his weapon. Driver says that was very dangerous, then asks if he knew that. The villain then fires a blast, saying that he thinks he can return the favor now. The villain cracks a smile at this using his conductor beam, which approaches very quickly, then it causes an explosion there. Other villains from afar are surprised by this. They wonder what that was. Driver is confused by that since the protagonist was still alive and had even been able to block the attack with his dark blade. Moros says his mana is over 1,000. This means he's 3 times stronger, and Cashin just analyzes. The soul asks if he was listening, but the protagonist doesn't answer, saying this was going to be a pretty fun fight. Moros asks if he's sure about that. Driver comments that he did a good job blocking that, wondering if he was going too easy on him. Then he lunges forward again with his screwdriver. Cashin anticipates the blow, avoiding it with a leap and a dodge. While still in the air, Driver advances once more, attempting several slashes that the protagonist simply avoids. Driver thinks, this bastard, he shouldn't be able to do this. It's like he's predicting my moves. Who the hell is this guy? If he's this skilled, there's no way I haven't heard of him. He tries another attack, thinking maybe he was the one who finished off Blaster. The blow is blocked by the protagonist's claws. Driver is surprised as his tool is breaking. The protagonist is surprised by this because Driver's eyes start to turn red, firing a beam at the protagonist next. Cashin trips him, knocking the villain to the ground. Driver thinks this sucks as he tries to regain his balance, shouting that he was a combat expert. Driver retreats with his tool in hand, preparing another attack with his hand. This time, his machine hand. The attack flies towards the protagonist. Cashin just moves his dark hand, launching several daggers created from darkness. They pierce and slice through the mechanical hand. Driver is surprised by this, and the protagonist appears above him, knocking him away with a punch. The villain thinks that he's no joke, and there's something different about the way he fights. He can't be this good at fighting unless he's a trained professional. His subordinates appear and say, "So you were here." They start teleporting to Driver's side. A rank Crow appears on the left and B rank Red Eye on the right. Another man appears behind the protagonist. It's B rank Black Hand, asking why he looks so worn out and if he wasn't going too easy on him. Cashin is surrounded by villains, but he just smiles and asks if he called his subordinates because he got wrecked in a one-on-one. Crow asks about him being wrecked, and Driver replies that's not right, as he hasn't been defeated yet. His subordinate jokes that he really was defeated. Blackhand thinks about him being wrecked, wondering how Driver lost to this amateur. The villain asks why he started a fight with him in the first place. Cashin replies that he wanted to fight someone strong. And also, he can't just let a murderer keep indiscriminately killing everyone he sees. Driver doesn't understand this. He asks if he's talking about the infamous serial killer, and Crow says there was nothing wrong with cutting off the killer's head. Driver asks if they think he's the killer because he was falsely accused and no one would believe false rumors. Blackhand wonders who he is to be so arrogant in front of Driver because he wants to take his life right now. Driver says he'll get straight to the point. He's not the killer he's looking for. The protagonist asks if he has evidence, but the guy says no. Suddenly, the protagonist's head starts to hurt. Blackhand thinks this is his chance because he's going to beat him to a pulp now. He approaches with his fists using the gauntlets of perdition skill. Then he thinks that the protagonist should go to hell. He then strikes the ground. But Cashin had dodged and says that was a really low thing to do. Blackhand is surprised by this. The protagonist says that trash like him are known for attacking people from behind. Blackhand tries another strike, but the protagonist just vanishes. Saying this was the cure for idiots like him, he landed a direct punch with his claw. Crow, Red-Eye, and Driver are shocked by this. Black Hand is thrown back. The archer runs to him as Driver says that was impressive. Red-Eye thinks that this kid just took down the number 3 rank in the villain district. Moros asks if the protagonist is okay. Driver comments that his head is spinning and he feels dizzy. Using the analysis from his glasses, he says it's because his power level didn't even reach 300 and it spiked too quickly in a short amount of time. Crow asks if that's all the power he has, and Red-Eye says he must be D rank. He wonders how a D rank managed to do something like that. Blackhand's magic exceeds the limits of a B rank, and he wants to know how he took that guy down in one hit. But Driver says there's no need to get worked up. Although it's rare, a B rank can defeat an A rank. Power alone doesn't determine the winner. He has a surprising amount of physical strength and quick reflexes. On top of that, he has combat skills that exceed his current capabilities. He was an exception. In mechanical terms, he was what you'd call a perfectly optimized high-quality machine. Then he takes a crystal from inside his tool, asking if he knows what it is. Cashin is surprised to see a magic crystal. Driver explains that a villain can increase their magic power through intensive training and also by ingesting these magic crystals. He throws it toward the protagonist. Then he tells Cashin to eat it. The protagonist asks why he's giving it to him. Driver says he wants to make a deal, but he isn't interested. The villain says he can't stand injustice and was talking about a random killer, so he wants him to catch the guy in his place. He gave him the crystal as a gift for making the deal, and he's free to accept it or not. Cashin says that he's claiming he's definitely not the killer. Driver says it's true and that he feels wrong. The protagonist asks why he doesn't find the culprit himself. Driver says everyone has something they can't talk about. The two of them then stare each other down. Cashin goes home a few minutes later, wondering if he really wanted him to eat it. Moros explains there are 2 types of crystals. One is natural, called a Jinn crystal, while the other is man-made, called a magic crystal. It's a shame it's not a Jinn crystal, but even this one will help him increase his magic power. Cashin says he already knew that. Moros warns that he should ingest it while in his villain form. Cashin holds the crystal in his human hands, then does the same with his villain claws. He asks if he's sure it's a magic crystal, and Moros confirms it. The protagonist stares at the fragment, saying that Jeff always warned him against eating something like this. Nothing happens to him immediately. He comments that nothing changed, and Moros tells him to wait a moment. Suddenly, energy floods the protagonist's body. The shadows on his body grow. Cashin wonders what this is. Moros tells him not to get agitated and to calm down. Then he's surprised by what happens next. The protagonist's body finishes molding itself. His claws then improve, and he's surrounded by magical energy. It starts to float away. Cashin thinks that his magic power has increased. He had only swallowed 1 magic crystal, but he feels full of power. Now he understands why villains love these magic crystals so much. It was like a cheat. He asks if Moros can use his eye to check his stats. A few minutes pass calmly. Cashin complains because his magic points only increased by 50 after all that. Moros wonders what he means by only. Because even if all villains swallowed the best magic crystal in existence, they'd only gain 5 or 10 points. If it's really 50 points, that would be the highest ever recorded, a 500% increase. It means the magic crystal is incredibly effective. It was absurd, even for someone of the catastrophe class. Cashin wonders what this is as it says magic crystal extraction in his hidden skills. He wants to know how the hell to use it, and Moros replies that it's exactly what it says. Extract magic power from weapons, including those created from Jinn crystals. Cashin complains that it's a crappy skill with a cool name, and Moros gets annoyed. Extracting magic crystals was unique to him. It means he can have as many crystals as he wants. Cashin says he'll have to find out where to get these weapons made from magic crystals at the Sungshin department store. In a donut shop, Dae-woong shows off a sword, commenting that he finally got his own weapon. It even had an incredible name, the Sword of the Great Bear and 4 Tigers. He then tells Wu-chan to say something, but his disciple just says it's a beautiful sword. Dae-woong says it was made with at least 2 top-quality magic crystals and was the best of the best. But Wu-chan says, putting the sword aside, he wants to know if he found anything about the villain who fought Blaster. Dae-woong complains about him changing the subject. However, he did a clean sweep of the data but found nothing. It seems to be a new villain. Wu Chan asks what if he's an unregistered hero. But Daewoo says that's unlikely judging by his appearance and characteristics. And now wasn't the time to worry about him, asking if he's heard about the serial killer since the Gadamgu special team was put on red alert because of him. Wu Chan asks if it wasn't Driver. They said he was the main suspect, but Daewoo says it's not him. The apprentice is confused by this, asking how he can be so sure. Daewoo says if it were a sports car or a gadget it would have been him, but he's far from being a killer. Wu Chang says Driver is still a villain, a crazy guy whose actions are unpredictable. But Dae Wong drinks his coffee, saying that considering it was a cold-blooded murder, it makes the probability of it being a villain high. However, it's not just villains who are crazy. Could also be any normal person. On another side of town, at a studio, a photo shoot was happening. The photographer tells them to give a cuter, more audacious look. The two girls lean on each other. They then change poses while the photographer praises them. They smile, and the photo shoot ends outside the studio. Nian complains that it's already 7 o'clock. She wanted to stop by the stationery store before going home, but there's no time. She wanted to buy that limited edition bottle. However, she looks at Min Young beside her. Nian approaches asking if she hasn't left yet, then she looks at her surprised. Min Young seems a bit hesitant, but she grabs her friend's arm saying they should go to the claw machine. Naun questions going at this hour. Min Young says it's been a while since they went there. She suggests they should try just once and it'll be quick, but Nan says she can't since she has to go home. But her friend begs her again. She agrees to go just once. From a distance, someone is watching the two girls. The killer cracks a smile at this. At his home, the next day, a news report circulates that the rampant killer will be caught by the Gadam Special Forces. Cashin comments that 3 people are already gone. Moros asks if he's going to accept Driver's proposal. The protagonist says he doesn't care about the proposal, but this so-called killer has already taken several lives in cold blood, and he can't just sit back and do nothing. Moros falls silent at this. Cashin says it's rare these days for a killer to appear who does this for no reason, and there's no other useful information besides the fact that the murders occurred there in the Gadam district. Moros asks about that thing Driver gave him a while ago. The protagonist wants to know what thing. On the day they made the deal, Cashin asks why he's giving him this, and Driver says they need a way to communicate. He made it so they can only send and receive texts or files. There's no GPS on it, so he doesn't need to worry. Says he doesn't want it, and Driver continues, saying he'll send information about the killer and he can send messages whenever he wants. He'll give the protagonist all the support he needs, so he must make sure to catch this killer. It was his last request for now. Cashin looks at the phone in his room. He then types a password into it, but suddenly he becomes hesitant. Slamming the phone on the table, he says he won't use it. His pride won't let him. He wonders how he could possibly exchange messages with a villain. Moros asks where he's going. Cashin replies that he's not going to just stand around in here. If he can't think of a solution, he'll just go look around. At the local community arcade, Min Young shouts that her friend got it. Nayun is silent as the girl says she's almost there, but she accidentally drops it. Nayun complains, and Min Young says it's a shame. They haven't gotten a single one yet and have to try again, but Nian says it's frustrating and they need to leave. Her friend points out it's not even 8 o'clock. A drone watches them from a distance. Nian says she told her before. Her annoying brother has set a curfew. Min Young seems worried about something. She asks if they can't stay just a little bit longer. Naun asks if something is wrong. The girl starts to tremble with fear. Then she says that she saw it. One of their classmates was murdered a few days ago. As she already knows, she saw the whole thing happen. Naun questions her about it, and Min Young says she wanted to tell someone but was too scared. She feels like the same thing is going to happen to her. Naun asks if she was seen. This is no time to be scared. It's not too late. They need to go to the police station and tell them right now, and she'll go with her. They have to run. If she really saw the killer, then they're both in danger. They reach the arcade's exit, but something blocks their way out. They wonder what's happening and why the shutters are closing. Nian then looks down at the floor, where there was blood instead of tiles. A voice says it looks like they've met again. The two girls turn around, afraid. Something begins to form out of the blood, creates a semi-humanoid shape. Min Young panics while Na-eun tries to protect her friend. The B-rank villain, Blood Rain, says she's a foolish child on top of a building, Cashin. He remains silent as Moro says he doesn't think wandering around will help. The protagonist says if he's just going to be a pain, he should have stayed home. But the spirit explains that even if he wanted to, he has to stay within a certain distance of the boy. But suddenly, Cashin's phone rings. He wonders what it is, and Moros asks if that isn't the phone driver gave him. And what about that whole speech he gave about pride? Cashin says he'll throw it away if they send him anything weird, but then he looks surprised. Back at the community arcade, the two girls tremble in fear. Meanwhile, the monster just cracks a smile. Na-tae-eun notices the drone nearby. She realizes it's a villain, and he's definitely the killer Min-young saw. Min-young wonders what they should do now. Na-eun remembers when Woo-chan gave her something. The girl asks what it is, and her brother explains it's a panic button. She shouldn't press it as a joke. Only if she's in real trouble so he can find her quickly. Na-eun presses the panic button, thinking that this is no joke and he'd better come fast. Blood Rain says they seem very tired, so he will grant the inferior creatures eternal rest. But Na-eun tells him to shut up, calling him crazy. If eternal rest sounds so good to him, then he should do it to himself. Blood Rain calls her an insolent child. He then approaches the girls. Nan thinks she needs to buy some time until her appa arrives, so she asks why he's doing this. Blood Rain is silent for a few seconds. He says it's a strange question. He doesn't need a reason to do something he enjoys. Nan thinks this guy is insane. Blood Rain continues that he will answer her naive question. A desire for fresh blood and to tear apart lifeless bodies is his reason. There's only one truth he's learned living in this world. There is nothing more pleasant than that. Nawin tells him to stay right there. Her brother will be here any moment. He's very strong, and 3 seconds is all he needs to beat a monster like you. Blood Rain cracks a smile, saying her very strong brother will be here soon. In that case, he wonders how her brother would react to seeing her lifeless blood-drained body and finding out it belonged to his dear little sister. The girls are terrified by this. Blood Rain says he'll begin and creates a blast of energy. Na-eun is surprised as the blast passes through her. It hits Min-young, who was right beside her. The girl falls to the ground. Na-eun turns around immediately. She calls out her friend's name. Then she runs to her, begging her to wake up, pleading for her to stay alive. Blood Rain warns that now it's her turn. It will be a sweet gift for her brother. The attack then closes in on the girl, but a voice shouts a curse at him, and the room lights up. A punch shatters the door. Na-eun turns around. Blood Rain also notices her. The protagonist says, "Here's a little present for the villain," moving his shadow claw with its dark blade. He launches the attack, telling the monster to take this. The attack approaches Blood Rain, but the villain just ducks his head. He stands up right after. However, Cashin charges at him. Blood Rain plants himself on the ground, and the protagonist notices. He then defends against the villain's blow. Cashin lunges forward again, but he notices his hand is shaking. He stops immediately. Blood Rain is surprised by this, wondering who the hell he is. Her super strong brother is a villain? None wonders who he is. Blood Rain shifts his gaze to the protagonist. He thinks that he's never seen these skills or this young man before, wondering if this is the one who defeated Blaster. And now he's right in front of him. This could be very interesting. Blood Rain announces he'll withdraw for now, but she shouldn't think she's safe. Cashin realizes this. The villain says she will lose her life to him, and it will be very painful for Nawin. Cashin runs toward him, asking where he thinks he's going, but he only manages to touch the blood. Just the tip of his finger makes contact as he has already vanished. Cashin curses, saying this sucks. He wonders where he went, and Na-eun tells him to wait a moment. She says she'd like to ask him a favor, to please save her friend, she says through tears. On the way there, Dae-woong asks if he thinks his sister pressed the panic button as a joke. Woo-chan says if that were the case, she would have at least called. She's not one to play pranks like this. Dae-woong says he called the police too and they should be on their way. Woo-chan just prays for his sister to be okay. Back at the community arcade, Na-eun tells the ambulance that there's a patient in critical condition, so they must hurry. Cashin says the ambulance is coming, but they need to stop the bleeding now, telling her to hand over a cloth if she has one, something that can stretch if possible. The girl searches her bag, then she hands it over. Cashin asks what it is, and Na-eun says they're socks, and they stretch a lot. The protagonist wraps the socks around Min-young's waist. He then asks if he can check her condition. Moros asks if he's being asked to check how critical her state is. If that's the case, he doesn't need to use his Eye of Wisdom. At the moment, there's nothing fatal. The protagonist says that's a relief, asks if she's going to be okay, and the protagonist says she will be if the ambulance arrives now, noting that they were fast as they've already arrived. He's handled first aid so they can take care of the rest now. Nayeon thanks him. She asks if he's leaving already. The protagonist confirms, saying it would only make her friend's situation worse if the paramedics ran away in fear of him. Cashin gathers his energy. He disappears from the spot. He flies across the buildings. Moros thinks that they were lucky. If he hadn't arrived in time, they would have both lost their lives. The protagonist notices something beside him. He leaps to the rooftop of another building, commenting that this has been bothering him for a while now. He asks what this thing following him is. Crow whistles. Cashin notices the legs dropping down. The woman appears on top of the building. She comments that they've met again and asks if he doesn't remember her, saying it's so annoying it makes her want to kill him. The protagonist remembers she's the woman who was with Driver. He replies that he saw her just a few hours ago, so there's no way he could forget. Driver thanks him for remembering them. Crow approaches, questioning him. She says her name, mentioning it's quite fitting. She wants to know his, but the protagonist says he doesn't have a name yet. So the girl says he doesn't have a villain name yet. Cashin says he's never thought of a villain name before. More importantly, he wants to know what this thing is. Crow explains that Driver uses them in areas where the killer might attack so they can catch him. He sends the information through these things. Thanks to that, they figured out who the killer was. Cashin questions his identity. Crow explains it's Bloodrain, who wanders the entire country committing countless murders. To be honest, she suspected he was involved, but it's hard to know his whereabouts, so she wasn't sure. Besides, there were also some internal problems, but he should forget what she just said or she'll take his life. However, she won't do anything to displease Driver. Meanwhile, the mechanic just goes to get his popcorn. She then remembers something. She says Driver asked her to deliver this and that he'll explain everything once he handles the situation. Then she tosses the small box to the protagonist. Cashin asks what the hell this is, and the girl says it's part of the reward, just as promised. It was 3 magic crystals lined up in a row. On top of that, they were of the best possible quality. The next day dawns on the city. A reporter announces that yesterday, around 8 in the evening, the villain committed a series of murders again. Fortunately, thanks to the heroes who arrived quickly, there were no casualties. A female high school student was undergoing treatment at a hospital, and her condition is currently stable. Yuri asks if Kong is leaving for school, and he says yes. Then she tells him to be careful because the world is a dangerous place these days. Walking through the city right after, Cashin thinks it's been a few days since he took over Kong Woo Kwan's body. He needs to get stronger to get his revenge on Lampasse, but he doesn't know how much he can trust this one-eyed thing. The deal he made with the villains of the district wasn't sitting right with him either. Last night, he questioned why she was giving him 3 high-quality magic crystals. Picking up one of them, he wondered if this was just part of the reward they promised. Crow asked if it wasn't enough, and the protagonist said that actually he'd say it's more than enough. The girl said that's what she thought. Bloodrain is incredibly strong, and you won't be able to defeat him with your current magic power. There's also a micro GPS tracker in there that Driver made. You should use it if it ever comes in handy. She needed to tell him something else. Driver had put together a list of Bloodrain sightings, and he should check it out later. Frankly, Driver doesn't have high expectations for him. But if he disappoints Driver, she thinks he understood what she would do. Cashin returns to the present, wondering what the hell they're thinking. Moros warns him that this isn't the way to school. The protagonist says he needs to get somewhere. After analyzing the data Driver sent, he realized there's a higher concentration of incidents at COY High School. Even those girls they met yesterday are from that school. Maybe he'll find some clues if he takes a look around. Moros asks if he plans to go there and start asking about the killer, and the protagonist says he'll do it if he has to. But there's something bothering him. It was one of those girls from yesterday. Nayoon was the sister of the most popular guy at his school. He needs to contact the school before going there. He calls, pretending he caught a cold and needed to rest at home for the day. At the Gatham District Hospital, Woo Chan sits in the waiting chairs. Daewoo hands him a coffee, commenting that he was up all night. He asks how Nayoon is doing, and Woo Chan says she just drifted off. He asks if he got a chance to read the case report, and Daewoo confirms. He says it was hard to check the CCTV footage since it was all destroyed, but based on the report, it was easy to see it was Bloodrain. It's common knowledge that he sucks the blood from his victims, leaving their bodies unharmed, but the ones in the Gatam district were badly injured. So they made the mistake of ruling him out. He can't believe it was him. Dae Woong sighs. Wu Chan says the villain who helped Na-eun and Min Young was probably that guy from before. Then he falls silent, commenting that Na-eun had called him her savior. If he's really a villain, he must be mentally unstable to have saved people, including his own sister. Wondering where he's going with this, Dae Woong says he wonders too. He did the same thing in the blaster case and they want to know who he was. Wu Chan just stares at his coffee cup. Near the girls' school, Cashin watches everything from a distance, analyzing everyone. Moros asks if he walked all this way and skipped class just to come here. Inside a convenience store, Cashin grabs a soda. He observes some girls at the counter asking the clerk if he's a model. The nerd says no. He's just a student on a semester off. The girls ask where he studies. The young man asks why they want to know. Cashin says he wants to buy the soda. The young man says he'll ring it up right now, flashing a smile at the protagonist. He scans the product's barcode and says it's 3201. Cashin reaches for his card, but then notices something. He sees the book called The Bride of Corinth. Something clicks. The clerk puts the soda in a bag. An old man asks if he can take the paper they're about to throw away. The young man says he'll help with that, bumping into the protagonist with his shoulder. Moros also notices something. Then the clerk says it'll just be a moment. The two watch him from a distance, completely suspicious. Outside the store, Moros calls out to Cashin, saying he needs to tell him something. The protagonist replies he's a villain. The soul is surprised. The protagonist says that as soon as he looked into his eyes, he knew right away. Moro says he's not sure if he's Bloodrain, and the protagonist mentions The Bride of Corinth, which was on the killer's counter. It's a classic story about a vampire, and he remembers the phrase, "You must lose your life to him." Cashin says he knew he'd heard that somewhere. It was a line from that book. Moros is surprised he remembers something like that, and the protagonist says he used to read a bit at the orphanage. Drinking the soda, he says they're about to find out if the card they picked is the Joker. At the convenience store exit, the clerk changes his clothes and closes up. Cashin watches him from a distance, following the man's path. Moros opens his eye, questioning if that isn't the way to Suwa High School for girls. Cashin wonders where he's going. He turns around right after as a car was approaching the elderly man. The man looks scared, but the protagonist grabs him and moves him out of the way. The car stops. The driver asks if he's okay as the old man gets up. Cashin turns, remembering what he had to do, but Bloodrain had already disappeared. The protagonist is annoyed by this. In one of the city's alleys, Moro says he never imagined he would transform in a place like this. The protagonist comments that there are no accessible rooftops around. Before anything else, he's going to eat the magic crystal. A transformation takes place in the alley. The protagonist's power even increases. Moros tells him to analyze it with his eye of wisdom. Cashin had 2 more skills unlocked. He notes they are hidden shadows and shadow movement. Moros explains that the increase in his points helps awaken some skills. New skills can only be obtained through an increase in spell points. When Cashin was a hero, he could get stronger just by training. He shouts that his points are at 470 even after swallowing 3 magic crystals. Moros suggests that maybe his body has developed a tolerance, and next time, he'll get fewer points until it's almost 0. Cashin says that if you could get strong just by swallowing magic crystals, they wouldn't have simply given him some. He can't just rely on crystals to get stronger. He needs to find other ways to grow. Then he tells Moros to show him Bloodrain stats. Moros warns that he's already done it twice. So if he uses it one more time, he'll become unconscious. The status window opens. Cashin wonders if one of these skills is the one he used to escape. He also has a mind control skill. Moros says his attribute is mind, so it's no surprise he has that ability. The protagonist repeats hypnosis. He warns that it won't be easy to defeat him at the city hospital building after everyone has left. Red energy was pouring out of a room. Everything was covered in blood. Bloodrain controls his loyal servants. Smiles spread across their faces while Bloodrain orders them to bring him that child. As evening fell the next day, the employees were already leaving work. In the hotel room, Min Young was in bed with Na Yoon sitting beside her. She mentions that he wasn't there, wondering who the hell that boy was. Then, some nurses call out to Na Yoon. They inform her that Miss Min Young is about to undergo some procedures. It's something very important, and if possible, they'd prefer she came with them instead of the guardian. They smile and wave bizarrely. Back in the alley from earlier, the protagonist activates purple shadows. Leaping with his new powers, he then crouches on the ground. Appearing on top of a building, he quickly vanishes from there as well. His energy begins to spread. Cashin thinks he can merge the hidden shadows with the shadow movement and use them together. Moros warns that it's not all good news. The protagonist drops his transformation, appearing on a rooftop. The soul warns that his magic crystal consumption is high and he needs to use it carefully. Cashin just asks him to stop nitpicking. A notification dings on his phone. The protagonist says it looks like this is the place. He already figured this would happen. That bastard Bloodrain is really heading to the hospital where the girls from yesterday are. Good thing he managed to place a tracker on him. Then Cashin's thoughts turn to Nayun. His resolve hardens immediately. He leaps once more. They need to get there fast. Inside the hospital parking garage, Naun asks what this is about and why they need to get into an ambulance for a hospital procedure. The doctor said it's very important and can't be done in the hospital. The girl asks what they mean. Blood rain finishes. It's a loyalty procedure. The girl spins around. The villain says he's glad to see her again because she is destined to lose her life to him. The girl is terrified. She screams that he's a villain and everyone should run, but the employees turn to face her, revealing they are also under hypnosis. Bloodrain says they only do as he commands, and he could turn her into an obedient puppet just like them, but it wouldn't work on her. Meanwhile, Nan hits the panic button. Bloodrain continues saying she has a strong personality, and has even overcome human instincts like fear. She was the perfect girl to be his bride, but the protagonist yells for him to stop spouting nonsense like a lunatic. Bloodrain asks who's there and tries to find the protagonist. Cashin tells the girl to get on the ground when he yells 3. Bloodrain wonders if it's that bastard from before. Then Cashin yells 3 and Nan drops. The protagonist shatters the window and slams his foot into his enemy's face. Bloodrain is thrown backward. He's surprised by the force of the blow, but the protagonist lunges with another kick, giving him no time to breathe, striking the monster in the stomach. Bloodrain hits the wall, breaking it. He screams that it's a curse, that he's ruining his plans again. Cashin advances with his powers, warning that he's just getting warmed up. The villain's eyes snap open. He dodges Cashin's blow aimed at his face. The protagonist keeps attacking relentlessly, and the villain dodges, just gritting his teeth, powerless. Then he tries to lunge with his claw. This was the sanguine slash which makes his claws grow. Cashin ducks, watching the attack. He retaliates with a direct punch to the villain's chin. Then he prepares another blow, telling him to go to hell, slamming the monster into the ground with his dark energy. Bloodrain starts to lose consciousness, but he quickly gets up, turning his face to the protagonist. He immediately tries to use hypnosis, shouting that he's got the boy. Now he would see what it's like to die. But the protagonist digs his claws into him, finishing the monster. Cashin continues to beat him relentlessly, causing a huge racket. He doesn't let go of the villain's face with his claws, smashing him into the ground once more. Then he asks if this is how he's been living until now. But the answer doesn't matter because from now on, he won't hurt anyone else. However, Bloodrain starts to laugh, saying that he's quite funny and amusing because he couldn't be stopped as he was invincible. Cashin asks if he's completely lost his mind, but the monster starts to stir in the blood, transforming into nothing but a laughing puddle. Cashin then looks to the side. He strikes the pool of blood, but only smashes the ground. Moros warns that Bloodrain is a very difficult opponent to deal with because physical attacks don't work on him when his bloody ability is activated. The protagonist thinks he'd be better off if he had a long-range ability, but someone asks where they are. The doctors ask why they're in the parking garage, and Nayun asks if they are okay. Moro says they've been freed from the hypnosis. The protagonist yells for them to take the girls somewhere safe. Then he runs off, and Nayun asks him to wait because she wants to talk to him, repeating for him to wait for her. Cashin keeps running through the parking garage, muttering that he can't have gone far because he's going to catch him no matter what. Moros remains silent. Meanwhile, Wu Chan and Daewoo are also running. The protagonist approaches an elevator but comes face to face with the two of them. They all stand there face to face. Daewoo says he's a villain, and the protagonist wonders who they are. The hero draws his sword, lunging at him while activating his knight ability. The protagonist asks why they're attacking him out of nowhere. They should stop getting in his way. He parries the sword. The weapon goes rolling on the ground, returning to Daewong's hands. He tells Wu Chan to provide cover. Quickly, he reflects that Na-eun said this was the one who saved her and wonders what a villain is doing at the hospital. Remembering his past until his master calls out to him, Wu Chan then activates his ability, declaring that it doesn't matter because all villains must be exterminated. A massive blast of fire is shot at the protagonist. Cashin charges head-on into the fire using his claw against it and activates Shadow Blade to split the fire in two. He curses under his breath as Daewon appears at his back. The protagonist spins around immediately, coming face to face with the hero's swift slash. Cashin manages to avoid the strikes with some difficulty, but his blood starts to splatter. Daewon shouts that he got him. Wu Chan charges towards him using flare magic, then he remembers his sister saying this was the one who saved her. Wu Chan hesitates for a second. The protagonist turns his head, seeing an opening to escape, so he uses his movement skills to vanish. Wu Chan then covers his face. Daewon asks what he was thinking, and the young man says he's sorry. But the instructor wants to know why they weren't attacked at Gate B of the parking garage. Daewon comments that he seemed to be using shadows, so maybe it's the darkness attribute. It's the first time he's heard of that, and he wonders how to explain everything in the report. At least they managed to land a hit on him. He asks why he has that look on his face, saying he'll cover for him and look after him like a little brother. Wu Chan just accepts it. Daewon continues, saying everything will be fine. But the young man says it's embarrassing when he talks to him like that. In an alley, Bloodrain thinks it's a curse he's been injured. Night begins to fall. The nerd thinks it's impossible to hide his bloodlust. He grinds his teeth, but then he licks his lips, saying this place will do, the Red Juice Club where he can quench his thirst for blood. In the middle of a nightclub, people were dancing until a girl notices something odd. She asks why there's blood on the man's clothes and if he needs help, but he says he just needs a drink. And if she wants, they can have a drink together. She doesn't need to worry about him because he's already found what he was looking for. Daewon is driving his sports car. The radio reports an incident at the Red Juice Club on 3rd Street where a villain suspected to be Bloodrain is causing a major disturbance. Daewon says, damn it, that bastard really managed to recover so quickly. Wu Chan asks what happened. The mentor explains that people's blood will help Bloodrain recover his strength and they won't get there in time to catch him while he's weakened. Wu Chan becomes wary of this. He remembers when he met his sister. He asked if she was okay or if she was hurt anywhere, but Na Tae-yoon said that person had saved her again. The young hero is surprised by this. The girl explains that right after, that person had disappeared. Back in the present, he keeps thinking about it. The car drives as far away as possible in another city alley. The protagonist was clutching the wound in his abdomen. Moros is thankful it wasn't a fatal blow, but you didn't seem like yourself back there. Cashin asks him why he'd say that. The ghost notes that he acted completely different against the villains and hesitated to attack those two just because they're heroes. Cashin thinks about it, but says they are the least of his worries now. The enemies he wants to fight are no longer villains. Moro says the wound is almost healed, then they look down. The protagonist's GPS was beeping non-stop until a screen suddenly appears at the Red Juice Club. Several people were lying lifeless on the floor. A few girls try to crawl away. Daewon and Wu Chan stumble upon this horrific scene, a bloodbath with Bloodrain sitting at a table. He says he's almost satisfied and, at least, physically stable now. Daewon says he's finally found the bastard, and Bloodrain asks them to please be quiet. Since he doesn't want his precious moment to be disturbed, Daewon looks at the people trembling in fear, then he's shocked as he realizes what happened. He tells his student to rescue the survivors and get out of there. Bloodrain says that now that he's recovering, doom must follow. He charges explosively toward the heroes. He hurls a bloody spear at them. Both of them notice the attack instantly. Daewon draws his sword from his waist, making a slash that repels the spear of blood. Wu Chan also advances using his fire powers and then prepares to unleash a blaze. But his mentor shouts for him to stop as he'd incinerate the civilians too. The young man turns around immediately. Bloodrain asks if he really thinks he has time to worry about other people. A bright light appears right above Daewon. The villain yells for him to worry more about himself as he launches an ability. Daewon is thrown as far back as possible. He slams into the wall, spitting blood from the damage he took. Blood Rain charges at him once more, announcing he would take his life with an ability that was truly magnificent. Landing his bloodthirsty strike on the hero's face, Blood Rain starts laughing as the blood is drained. Wu-chan attacks from above, his fist imbued with fire. He lands a blow that destroys everything in its path. Blood Rain appears behind him, saying it's a good ability, but useless if you don't know how to use it. Wu-chan turns, wondering where he came from. But the villain readies his claws against the young man, slashing him across the chest. Wu-chan is wounded and thinks, this sucks. The monster's energy begins to grow, but the young man tries to retaliate with a kick, making Blood Rain retreat instinctively. Wu-chan then falls to the ground, clutching his bleeding chest. Blood starts to drip from the claw. Blood Rain says he should have put more force into his strikes. If he had struck harder, he would have certainly broken his bones. Wu-chan thinks that this bastard is too strong. Considering the nature of his ability and the civilians' lives, it'll be hard to win while having to limit his power's output. Blood Rain says that was a pitiful yet significant blast, but it's understandable since you have to worry about the hostages. Then he calls out to Kim Wu-chan, saying he has a very beautiful little sister and that he's done some research on her. She's smart and charming, and she managed to deceive him by confusing him with that shadow villain. Deceiving him is a severe punishment, and lying to him is punishable by execution. Wu-chan unleashes his flame and tells the bastard to go to hell. Blood Rain bursts into laughter thinking he's so emotional because he's about to savor the blood of a hero who's reached the peak of rage, and that's something truly unique. The villain says he still seems to be full of confidence. In honor of all that confidence, I'll give you a chance to show if it's an illusion you're clinging to or if it's something real. In another corner of the city, Blood Rain says that if Wu-chan defeats him here, everyone will be saved and suggests he use his full power. You must do your best. The villain thinks this dark place is perfect and that he'll be able to pleasantly enjoy his blood under this beautiful night sky. Wu-chan then notices something. He charges forward since he's been given the opportunity. He shouldn't have any regrets, so he launches a ring of fire. The attack flies towards Blood Rain, but the villain just cracks a smile, dodging the blast of fire with an acrobatic move. Wu-chan is surprised by this. As the claw lunges towards him, Wu-chan manages to dodge the blow. But the villain asks if that's all he can do. He told him to do his best. The strike hits the young hero. Blood Rain announces that he'll also fight with everything he's got. Back at the Red Juice Club, Cashin wonders what happened here. Then he looks at a gash on the wall. He remarks that it looks like a huge scratch. Moro says that judging by the depth of the cut, whoever made it must be powerful. Cashin wonders who could have done this until he comes face to face with Daewoo on the floor. The protagonist thinks it's this guy again. He then asks if he's dead, and Moro says he's still breathing. The protagonist notes that Wu-chan should be here, but he can't see him. Moros tells Cashin to look at this. It was a magic sword lying on the ground. Cashin picks it up, remarking that he can feel its energy when he touches it. Moros says it's a great opportunity and he should extract the mana stone from the sword. The protagonist agrees, but it belongs to someone else. Remembering the cut Daewoo had given him, he decides to extract it. The protagonist throws the sword to the ground, holding the two magic crystals. Cashin then eats them. Energy begins to surge within him. The protagonist is then overwhelmed. It hits his chest, making the protagonist realize something. Moros is surprised by this. The energy in the room becomes completely dark. Cashin says he doesn't even need to check his stats because he recognizes this feeling of being absurdly strong. On top of a power tower, 3 people watch, wondering when he'll arrive. They were tired of waiting. Wu-chan lunges forward with his fist of fire, focusing all his rage into the attack, but Blood Rain simply catches the blow with his hand. He then advances on the young hero, warning him that such a small flame won't affect him. A sphere forms in his claws. Then it strikes Wu-chan's abdomen. The young man loses consciousness. Blood Rain says he's so weak, it's pathetic. He readies his claws, telling the poor insignificant being to blame his own weakness for this defeat, as he will now grant him the mercy of becoming a part of him until a voice shouts that he's truly sick. Cashin appears behind the monster using his ability. He tells him to stop spouting nonsense, calling him just a damn leech. They face each other. Blood Rain says he's finally shown up and asks if he ever gets tired of meddling in his plans. Cashin replies that it's impressive he can speak so confidently after running away from him. Blood Rain bursts into laughter, warning that his body's condition is different now. Dozens of people lost their lives, and their blood contributed to making him more powerful. All this absolute power was invincible. Not even an S-rank hero could stop him now. Cashin repeats the word invincible. Wuchan gets up right after. He's surprised, wondering what he's doing here. Bloodrain prepares an energy sphere, telling him to behold his absolute power. Wuchan thinks it's incredible. He didn't even use his full power against him. Bloodrain then unleashes the attack on the protagonist. These were his dozens of blood spears. The attack closes in on Cashin quickly, but the protagonist just moves his claws, deflecting with his shadow blade powers. The energy blast is then repelled. Something grabs the protagonist's arm. Bloodrain lunges with his claws, yelling at him to go to hell, but Cashin had already vanished from in front of him. The villain is shocked by this. Cashin appears at his back, telling him he's over here now. Bloodrain spins around trying to elbow him. He screams that he's a bastard, but the protagonist just dodges. He readies his fist with all his might and then lands a blow on Bloodrain's chin. His leg also moves quickly, striking the monster's abdomen next. Bloodrain starts to lose consciousness. Cashin asks where that so-called absolute power is and when he's going to start using it as he lands another blow on the villain's head. Bloodrain is thrown far back by the impact. Wuchan is completely shocked by this. He wonders what just happened. He was different from when they fought at the hospital. He was definitely hiding his true strength, but he wants to know who the hell he is. Bloodrain spits blood, muttering and calling him a bastard. Cashin approaches saying he claimed not even an S-rank hero could beat him and asks if this is his full power. Bloodrain begins to emanate a blood essence. The protagonist asks if he's already trying to run away again. Bloodrain says he doesn't know who the hell he is, but admits he's stronger. But physical attacks alone won't defeat him since he can turn into blood. The next time they strike, he's sure he'll win. But Cashin tells him there won't be a next time and traps him with his shadows. He says people like him are worse than trash, and Wuchan is surprised. A dark flame forms in his hand. Cashin warns that he's going to roast him alive. Bloodrain is surprised by this. The flame of darkness is hurled at the creature. Kong Wu now had 520 mana points and had gained these abilities with his dual attribute being the flames of darkness. The next day at the hospital, the news reports, this is a YEBC breaking news update. Bloodrain, who was causing chaos in downtown Gadam last night, has been apprehended after an intense fight. He was a serial killer who had been striking fear across the country. Thanks to the heroic actions of Wuchan, a very talented hero who fought against him. Dae Wong pats him on the shoulder, saying he's proud and that it must have been tough. He wonders what would have happened if he hadn't defeated him. Wuchan tells him he doesn't understand, then he looks down. He explains that after the battle, he contacted headquarters. Cashin grabs Bloodrain's head. He holds on as he drags him away. Wuchan pictures the fire ability, wondering why it was black and if it was a dual attribute because he'd never heard of that before. Cashin then calls out to Wuchan, telling him to call the police and an ambulance because he was badly hurt. Wuchan says he made it clear that he wasn't the one who defeated Bloodrain, but it was as if they ignored what he told them. Dae Wong asks if it was that kid who fought against Blaster. The young man confirms it was the same person who defeated Bloodrain. The heroes drink some water at the hospital. Dae Wong asks if he means to say he's a good guy villain. Wuchan falls silent, but his mentor tells him to relax, that they don't need to worry about it. He must have had some objective for doing that. Could have been a power struggle or a fight over territory. He asks where his Hokuto sword is, but Wuchan says the police have it in custody. Daewon celebrates, happy about it. Wuchan just watches the scenery through the window the next day at school. In one of the gardens, the delinquents gather. Daegu sits with the three stooges. They ask if the others saw that Wuchan defeated the villain Bloodrain, saying it was impressive. The blonde one says it's a good thing he didn't mess with him, or he'd be 6 feet under by now. Kai-hoon then notices something. He asks what happened to his eye. Daegu replies that someone hit him. He suffered a severe fracture, enough to be hospitalized. Ki-hoon shouts that the bastard has to pay for the treatment. The delinquent says that's easy to say, but they can't face him. The one with purple hair says they should get the gang back together. Daegu says that's enough. He doesn't know why, but that bastard was scary. Even scarier than Wuchan, who they say defeated the villain. He asks if they've ever seen a human with glowing eyes. Ki-hoon becomes a little wary upon hearing this. In classroom 3, students ask if others have seen it. Kim Wuchan was amazing. He looked so cool. Moros says everyone was talking about what happened yesterday. Cashin wonders when he'll have time to go see them. Besides the rewards, there are other things he needs to check. Moros asks about it. The protagonist begins to think quietly. Later, in the villain district, a device shoots out a strange tape. A girl starts spray painting while chewing gum. She draws a bear over some stickers. Someone approaches with a bucket of paint. He falls silent upon seeing the scene. Inside a building, it's quite noisy. Driver was building something new with his tools. He hears the door open behind him. People enter saying that when someone arrives, you should greet them. But this place is a mess, and it smells terrible. Driver asks if the first thing he does upon seeing him is lecture him. The man replies that Driver was the one who called him. The villain asks about it then. Drinks are served on the table. Driver asks if he saw that fight with his own eyes. The masked man answers yes. He saw everything. It was like watching a movie. He'd seen it from beginning to end. He was Wong Silgonis, a rank. Driver asks what he thought of him, and Wong replies that he was emotionless. Aroma says it was a crappy, cliché-filled battle and Odd agrees. Wong tells them not to worry. It's because he's like a main character. He stands out. It was like seeing a brilliant black diamond. Driver asks if that was a compliment. Wong says he can be praised for what he accomplished. So he must know about what he has, which is why he sent him there. He reveals that the protagonist has a dual attribute, surprising Driver. The villain turns away, thoughtful. Then he faces Wong. He asks if he's serious, while the other asks if he didn't know. Driver says he thought he was different from other villains, and Wong comments that he really didn't know. A villain with a dual attribute was something they'd never heard of. Driver replies that people like that have existed before. A long time ago, during the mythical era, they existed. Cashin reflects that the villain district doesn't exist to imprison villains. It exists to prevent fights between villains and heroes, allowing them to live without fear of attack. Nowadays, it's a place that exists for the peace of villains. This was the villain district. He comments that he can't get used to this place no matter how many times he's been here. Driver says he's right on time. His aura seemed a little different from the last time he saw him, but he's glad they could meet again. Once again, in an abandoned building, but this time at the Paradise Bar. A waiter serves them both. A drink is placed on the table. Driver says the grapefruit juice here is really good, and after he drinks it, he'll give him a tour, delivering the reward he had promised. Driver puts on his glasses and is surprised. His magic power has increased. He asks if he swallowed some magic crystals or what he did, but Cashin questions how he could have. Driver wonders who this guy is. The last time they met, he only had 300 magic points. But now, he has over 500. Magic power can increase that much just from the crystals he gave him. He wonders if it has something to do with his dual attribute. Cashin replies that he's been curious about something for a while. He wants to know where to get these magic crystals and if there's some kind of supplier. But a voice says he can get them from him. Yuchai, an unregistered a rank hero. He picks up a game piece from the table, then creates some sandwiches, announcing it's a complimentary dish for a very special customer. Driver says this guy is the owner of the bar and a hero who lives in the villain district, while Yuki tells him not to call him bro. Driver says he wants a good discount on some crystals, and Yuki says he's already selling them dirt cheap. Driver asks him to put their friendship on the line since they've known each other for a long time. Cashin reflects on the hero who lives in the villain district. This guy must have quite a story about how he ended up here. So he asks if he can buy magic crystals from him, but Yush replies only if he's a member of the district's family. Driver says he just needs to live in the Villezone's residential district, and Cashin asks if he wants him to live there and serve as a subordinate. The villain explains that he needs to take a test, and depending on the results, he could even become the boss instead of a subordinate. Yush asks if he wants to stop being a Villezone boss, and Driver says he's been thinking about it for a while. The protagonist says he's not interested in becoming a Villezone boss, and Driver asks why since it's a great gig. He'll have total authority there. He can even have his own subordinates, and he'll get an exclusive luxurious personal training facility. Cashin says he's not interested in anything other than getting stronger, but the villain tells him he'll be able to get magic crystals on the black market. Cashin looks at Yush, thinking he's not sure, but it seems this guy is a black market courier. And that bald guy too, since neither of them seems weak. Driver says he receives a monthly salary to cover expenses, which is another good point. Cashin asks how much he gets, and the villain tells him to come closer, whispering in the protagonist's ear and startling him with the amount. Driver keeps watching with a smile. Cashin then stares at the two of them, while Yuchai just watches the scene in another part of the city. Blackhand says it tastes horrible and wonders if he's even chewing real meat. He wants to eat chicken burgers from Papa Han's, but his friend replies that Queen's is good too. B+ rank Crush is craving pizza, but can't remember the last time he had one. Blackhand complains that he destroyed the only pizza shop in the Ville Zone, and Crush says pineapple pizza is unforgivable. Someone approaches from behind saying they're all here. The B-rank villain, Double Blade, says now is not the time to be wasting time talking about pizza. Blackhand asks what's going on, if a hero invaded the Ville Zone or something, but his friend tells him that Bastard is here, the young man in all black who struck him that time. Blackhand remembers and gets angry. He asks where that little shit is, and Double Blade says he's with Driver. They went to the Paradise Bar, and he's sure Driver has forbidden fights between villains inside the zone. Blackhand announces that today is the day that rule gets broken in another part of the city. A person is digging in the ground. Driver comments that his name is Dirt Dog because he loves digging in the dirt. The guy behind him is named Cleaner. He's obsessed with cleaning and can't let a single speck of dust pass. They're two weirdos, but they don't hurt people. They might not hurt humans, but they can cause damage to society. That's why they need a place like the Ville Zone. Cashin reflects that they really seem different from the villains he's used to seeing, probably because of that bastard. So he asks why he instigated him to defeat Bloodrain, and Driver reveals there's a traitor among them. The protagonist is surprised by this. Driver says that in order to eliminate a traitor, they need someone with no connection to the Ville Zone or to him. You might not know this, but just like heroes, there are different groups of villains. There are those who follow rules and those who despise rules and laws, doing things their own way. Cashin asks if there's a connection between Bloodrain, the Ville Zone's residential area, and the traitor. Driver replies it was just an element of surprise. He was certain someone else was involved, and their final goal is the destruction of the Ville Zone. The protagonist says it has nothing to do with him, and Driver replies that he knew he'd say that. That's why he likes him. He should become a family member in the Ville Zone's residential area. Cashin asks what nonsense he's talking about. Driver swears on his villain's life that it was a sincere request in another part of the city. At the luxury restaurant called Vesperma, Yuri is taking notes by the shelves, wondering if Kongwoo has eaten yet. Ever since she gave him the card, she hasn't seen him. A butler calls for the manager, informing her that the owner is calling for her. In his office, the restaurant owner says she works hard, is sociable, and has no mentionable flaws. A man on the phone says that's indeed what he's heard about her and was looking forward to seeing it, while the owner comments that he's sad to let her go. The man jokes that he feels like he's taking advantage of him. Yuri knocks on the door asking for permission to enter, and the owner hangs up the phone, saying he'll call him back later. That man looks at his phone with a smile. Back in the office, the owner hands her a letter. He explains that the central office in America sent an invitation. They recognize how hard she works, so they've invited her for additional training at their office. In addition to paying for her flight, they will provide an apartment near the central office. It's a great opportunity, and she should go. Yuri agrees. Then she immediately thinks of her brother. On the other side of town, the protagonist starts walking out of the district. He was quite quiet now, remembering Driver asking him to become a member of the Ville Zone, then questioning what nonsense he was talking. He was surprised to hear him swear on his villain's life. It had been a sincere request. Cashin stops right after. Moros asks if something is bothering him. Cashin then shifts his gaze, seeing Blackhand standing by the wall. Crush asks if that's the guy. Cashin says the Ville Zone seems to have a rat infestation problem. Double Blade wonders if he's already sensed his presence, noting that he's definitely above average. Crush says he's going crazy and wants to turn him into a puddle of blood right now, but Blackhand tells him to calm down because he's going first, grinding his teeth and vowing to get payback for that earlier humiliation. Cashin wonders what he's talking about, and Moros tells him to be careful as it looks like they're going to attack as a group. Blackhand then finishes concentrating, running while screaming for him to die. Another glass is thrown at him, then it transforms into a huge barrel. Blackhand asks what the hell this is, saying it's not nice to treat people who are leaving like that. The B-rank Ju AK stands in front of him. Blackhand asks what kind of drunken nonsense she's up to, and Ju AK replies that she just wanted to warn him that he's breaking the rules. It's against the rules to gang up on someone, and Blackhand yells that it only applies if the person is part of the Vil zone. Doubleblade notices feathers falling to the ground, and Crow says he soon will be. She stands above the building, watching. She holds one of her crows with a single finger. Blackhand wonders how she got there. Crow cracks a smile, asking if they were just going to let him walk away. The two of them are startled by this. Later that night, the apartment door opens. Yuri walks in, sighing after a tiring day at work. She turns on the lights, wondering if her brother is already asleep. She turns the doorknob to his room, knocking on her brother's door. She remembers her boss recognizing how hard she works and inviting her to a training program at the main office. Yuri puts her bag on the floor, announcing that she's going to take a shower and go to sleep. The letter is left lying on the floor. In another part of the city, Cashin is running with 10-kilogram weights on his feet and hands. Moros says it's a classic training method, while Cashin comments that there's nothing better for improving both stamina and strength. From now on, he needs to keep in mind that he won't always be fighting one-on-one and might have to face multiple opponents alone. For that, stamina is crucial. So Moros comments that it's a sensible way of thinking. Yesterday, when the fight was interrupted, Crush yelled for them to wait because he needs to take the test to become a member of the Vil Zone family. He wonders if he'll really do it, and Blackhand shouts that his only desire right now is to take his life. Cashin replies that he'll take the test, but only in 10 days. The villains then retreat. Dwack says it's a welcome ceremony and explains the rules. The battles will be one-on-one, and taking a life is forbidden unless it's unavoidable. Furthermore, she will be his first opponent, so she hopes for a fun fight. Cashin stares at her with a cold expression. He honestly doesn't care about being part of the Vil's own family. The people in the square are surprised. The protagonist uses 2 bars for support and thinks that if he can get stronger with this, he'll be able to get his revenge on Lampasse. He would fulfill this wish even if he ends up in hell. Cashin notices something to his side. 2 twin girls are warming up. He starts running and they both watch, commenting that he's training hard and that it's definitely him. Aroma and Oat say they won't let Wong find out and that this is their secret. Back at his house, the protagonist takes a shower to relax his body. As he walks into the living room, he dries himself off and wonders if his sister is still asleep. But then he notices something strange. He sees the mess she had left in the living room. The protagonist says he'll have to clean up this mess. Then he looks at the letter on the floor. Yuri wakes up yawning and says her brother is up early, but she sees him looking at the letter she had received. The girl snatches the letter and asks what he was doing and if he had read it. Cashin tells her it looks like an invitation from America. Yuri becomes hesitant and says she won't accept it. Cashin asks why and she says she can't just leave him here. The protagonist says he'll manage on his own, thinking it'll be more comfortable that way. The girl asks if he knows how to cook his own food and do laundry since he also needs to throw out bad food. Cashin says he's not a child anymore, and Yuri points out that he's 19 and still a senior in high school. But the protagonist tells her to go since it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She shouldn't worry about him and just do what she has to do. Back in the villain's own district, the 3 gather in a corner. Doubleblade says there's 1 week left and asks if he's really coming while Blackhand asks who. His boss replies that it's the guy who's going to fight Dwack, and the villain comments that he wanted to fight him. Doubleblade says he even defeated Driver. Blackhand says he must have gone easy on him, while Crush asks if he wasn't defeated too. The young man asks if he's picking a fight, and the villain with knives says they'll only get to fight him if he defeats Ju AK. Blackhand says it'll be fun to watch him get crushed one-sidedly, but he's gonna bet on him instead of Ju AK. He still wants his revenge on him, and he'll do his best to finish it. Later in his room, Moros asks if the protagonist supports his sister going to America. Cashin says it's a great opportunity for her, but the soul asks if that's the only reason. The protagonist remains silent, explaining that it's as good for her as it is for him. And he's not saying that as Cashin, but as Quan Kong Wu. Moros asks if he'll be okay living alone, and the protagonist says, of course, since he lived alone in America. The ghost comments that he's asking this while seeing what he's searching for, how to cook rice. In another room of the house, Yuri stares at the letter. She sighs as she thinks about what to do, remembering what her boss and her brother had said. Later, she's brought back to her senses by her friends calling her name. At a bar, they ask if she called them over just to see her sad face and if she's worried about some guy. The blonde friend tells the nerdy one to shut up. Finally, the beers arrive at the table. The girls decide to just drink. As she'll open up more once, she has a little alcohol in her system. Yuri downs the glass in one gulp. Back at her house, she's visibly drunk. Cashin asks if she's okay and why she drank so much, but Yuri says she's not drunk. She says her little brother is so cute. While Moros comments that she's out of her mind, the protagonist puts her in her bed. Yuri says he used to follow her everywhere, but now he's mature enough to take care of her. Cashin associates this with Jeff saying he was mature enough for him to worry about. He then looks at his sister fondly and covers her up, watching for a few more seconds. The next day at the building, Yuri complains about a headache because she drank more than she should have, but she notices something on the table. She picks up the note from the protagonist. She reads that he prepared bean sprout soup for her, which is good for a hangover. She should heat it up and eat it with rice. The note ends with him saying that he knows how to cook and isn't a child anymore. Another day at an airport, Yuri tells him not to skip meals and to eat at least 3 times a day. She adds that she'll text every morning and night to check on him. He shouldn't forget to lock the door because she knows how scary the world is these days. The protagonist tells her not to worry. Yuri tells him to call if anything happens. Cashin replies that he should be the one saying that. He'll fly straight to America if she's in trouble. Then they both smile at each other. Yuri says goodbye, telling him she'll call as soon as she arrives. Then her plane takes off. Cashin just watches it go, a look of longing on his face. Later, in the Vilzone district, Driver explains that he wins the fight if his opponent surrenders or is unable to fight. He would fight 3 times and they gave credit for participating. So there's no penalty even if he loses. It just means he won't get the chance to challenge the Vilzone's boss. Cashin complains that he's too noisy and they should just start. Driver cracks a smile asking if Jwack is ready, and the woman confirms. Moros tells Cashin to stay calm and not to pay attention to the opponent's provocations, but the protagonist doesn't care. Doubleblade wonders what will come out on top, his speed or Jwack's brute strength. She wasn't just some fighter with only strength and endurance, but an expert in hand-to-hand combat with a trained physique. She was a smart fighter who knows how to fight to her advantage. Trying to beat Jwack using only speed wouldn't work, and she was the worst kind of opponent for him. Driver says that, in that case, they should begin the battle. Without wasting time, Jwack charges at the protagonist, shouting that they should get right to it. Cashin just quickly moves his shadows, trapping his opponent in place. Then he yells that he's above her. Juk wonders where he is since he wasn't there. Doubleblade yells that he's right in front of her, but the darkness had already closed in. Cashin moves his legs, ready to strike. He lands a kick to Jwack's face, knocking her out. Driver sighs at this, and the other villains are stunned. Jwack was already defeated on the ground. Cashin tells them to bring on the next opponent. Blackhand thinks this is unbelievable. He knocked out Jwack, one of the toughest villains in the Vilzone in terms of endurance, with a single blow. Cashin tells them to stop wasting time and get on with it, while the others wonder what kind of monster he is. The protagonist adds that anyone who wants a beating can step up. Crush asks if his friend isn't going to fight him, but a dagger flies in his direction, sticking into the ground. Cashin then looks up. Red Eye tells him not to get cocky just because he beat someone, because he is the best hunter in the entire Vilzone, and he will be his opponent. In another corner of the district, someone comments that there's no way that would happen. They didn't need to worry about Blood Rain. They weren't expecting much from him anyway. The person on the phone asks about the Gaddam district, and the person says it will soon collapse. Please just trust my words and wait for it because they will keep their word no matter what. Back on the battlefield, an explosion occurs. Arrows fly from different directions. Cashin dodges them with incredible speed as Moros notes that he's shooting homing arrows. One arrow closes in on the protagonist, but he decides to jump, barely dodging the arrow, which hits a building. Red Eye announces that he's got him. And with that, the hunt is over as he aims his bow from above Cashin. Then, he unleashes his rapid shots against the protagonist. Cashin tries to defend himself with his arm. A huge explosion rocks the district. Red Eye returns to his building, wondering if that was enough to defeat him, since he was expecting more. However, darkness begins to form behind him. Red Eye turns around. He comes face to face with Cashin, who advances saying that Red Eye is the one being hunted. Red Eye holds his hands up, announcing that he surrenders. He has lost. The protagonist asks how, and Red Eye explains that a ranged attacker has no chance of winning when caught in close quarters combat. Cashin asks if he's giving up for such a stupid reason, but the villain says he's dead serious. After all, he never imagined he'd have to fight him, but Driver asked him to. The villain's drone was watching the fight. Cashin asks about it, and Red Eye says that he doesn't want anyone to get seriously injured in this test. He then hands a DSP to the protagonist. Cashin asks what it is, and Red Eye explains it's a desire suppression patch, and all the villains in the district have one. It's effective if you place it behind your ear, as it turns skin-colored and becomes unnoticeable. Cashin thinks that he's seen this injected into imprisoned villains, but it's the first time he's seen it in patch form. He wonders who the hell created something like this. Red Eye warns him that his last opponent is probably Black Hand. He's emotional and very temperamental, but he has a cute side too, so he shouldn't be too hard on him. Cashin wonders about that, remembering who he was. Back in the arena, Black Hand was hesitant. Crush asks who they think won, and Doubleblade says the Bow Addict was at a disadvantage since he's not suited for one-on-one battles. After all, he has enough strength to knock out Jwack with a single blow, but Black Hand yells that it was just luck. He falls silent when they ask if he really believes that. Crush asks if he's saying it's hard to win one-on-one and suggests a 3-on-1. Jwack asks what's wrong with that. After all, even lions work as a team when hunting a buffalo. Black Hand complains that they are unbelievable. He shouts that he will never team up with someone who was defeated in one hit and that he's not a lion, but a lone Siberian tiger. Jwack says she didn't come here to tell jokes and that this test was a test in name only. All three of them were sacrifices to make that boy shine. Black Hand asks what the hell she's talking about, and Ju AK tells him to listen to the end. She heard Driver talking at the Paradise Bar saying he was gonna hand over the boss position to the kid. Black Hand yells that it's a joke, but Ju AK says that Yuche was also there, and he can ask him for confirmation. That villain says this is impossible. Ju AK says that boy is just an unknown villain, and they shouldn't give the supreme title of the Vil Zone to this guy. She asks if it doesn't piss him off that he's getting so much preferential treatment from Driver. So they must decide if they're going to team up to change the situation. Doubleblade asks what she means by that.
You cracks a smile.
She announces that she brought some comrades who think like her, and the more, the merrier. On Yuri's plane, a flight attendant comes by with a meal, telling her to enjoy it. Yuri says there's still a while before she gets there. She looks out the window, sighing, wondering if Kong Wu is eating properly. Back at the tournament, Cashin is eating a sandwich. Reed Eye hands it to him to replenish his energy. Cashin repeats this, and Moros questions if there's some hidden motive. The protagonist says that Jeff always told him to be careful of people who are too nice. Suddenly, footsteps approach. Black Hand walks towards the protagonist, irritated. Cashin says so he really is his next opponent, while Black Hand demands to know what he did to Driver. The protagonist asks what the hell he's talking about, and the villain repeats the question. Crush attacks from behind with his hammer, slamming it into the ground as Cashin dodges. Doubleblade approaches from behind him with a knife. Cashin notices this and counterattacks with a punch. The villain thinks that being able to do that in this situation is incredible. He then retreats, placing his fist on the ground. Cashin cracks a smile. He says they couldn't win one-on-one, so they decided to come at him 3-on-1 to make up for their weakness with numbers. But something comes from behind him. Jwack's barrel is thrown. Cashin dodges, moving out of the way, and then he's surprised when he looks down. Jwack says there are more than just 3 of them preparing a punch. The drunken lunge hits the protagonist's abdomen. Elsewhere, Driver comments that quite some time has passed. He wonders if he's doing well, and Crow asks if he means that Black Duck. Driver replies that he doesn't have a villain name yet, while the woman says she's getting jealous of the attention. She then puts a finger on his chin, telling him to give her that attention, and she'll return it 1,000,000 times over, while Driver just thinks about what a good name for him would be. Red Eye arrives on the scene saying he's found them. He remarks that they really are a lovey-dovey couple, always stuck together. Driver says he did a good job today. Crow asks about the Black Duck, and Red Eye wants to know if she's talking about someone. Driver then activates his glasses. He's surprised, and Crow asks what happened. Driver remains silent, just using his glasses, observing the building where the fight is taking place. A girl sends messages to Dirty Dog. While hearing the sound of the explosion, she looks at the district being destroyed by it. Cashin slams into the wall from the blow. He grits his teeth and tries to recover. Crush moves forward, saying it's his turn to attack. Cashin pushes off the wall and grabs his weapon, landing a powerful punch to his face. Black Hand charges, yelling that he's a bastard and that he should go to hell. Cashin dodges the blow, getting behind him. Then he uses his claws to grab his hair, using it as leverage for a knee strike. The protagonist moves in for another blow, landing a punch on the villain's face. Crush charges, yelling that he's a piece of shit, but the protagonist kicks the villain away. An attack comes from behind him. Cashin dodges Jwack's barrel once again, lifting her off her feet. He grabs her hair. Jwack grits her teeth at this. The protagonist powers up his knee and strikes her chin. Blackhand sighs in irritation, watching Cashin saying that this arrogant bastard is too strong to think they'd lose to this nobody. Meanwhile, Crush asks if he's still alive. Blackhand wants to know where a monster like him came from. Cashin shifts his gaze. The B rank pointer says he looks tough, and the C+ level hammer boy says that just makes the hunt better. Moro says they just keep showing up, but the protagonist comments that flies will always be flies. Pointer gets angry at being called that. The villain's eyes just widen in fear, trembling with fear as he slowly backs away because of the energy emanating from Cashin. Until a villain runs up from behind him yelling, "He's mine." Introducing himself as the Guardian of Order, the B+ rank Iron Mask steps forward. He then steps out, places his hands on his shoulders, and declares he'll enforce justice and maintain peace in the Vil Zone. Cashin just dodges with a tilt of his head. He asks what that was all about. Hammer Boy advances with his hammer. He shoots a nail, screaming that the hunt has now begun. Cashin easily dodges the projectile and keeps running. Zigzagging toward the villains, Pointer appears in front of his friend. Hammer Boy tells him to get out of his way, but Pointer tells him not to order him around. Wielding his fire spear, he says it's time for the protagonist to meet his warm flames. Cashin creates fire in his own claw. Pointer is stunned by the approaching dark combustion, wondering what kind of flames these are. Crush asks if that bastard is a mage, and Jwack questions why they're just standing there. She says it's time for their special attacks, advancing with her barrel. She pours all her energy into it. She fires, telling the protagonist to go to hell. Cashin manifests his darkness in his claw, creating a dark blade that splits the barrel in half. Crush uses the edge as a springboard, advancing with his hammer in hand. Cashin creates a dark blade in his hand and charges forward, cutting the hammer in two with his shadow sword. Then he turns around, striking Crush's abdomen with a kick. Blackhand watches all this, terrified. He wonders what the hell this bastard is, seeing not a single drop of hesitation from him. He starts to wonder if they're the ones actually being hunted, but suddenly something starts to appear and trap the protagonist. A villain behind him announces that he's got him. He knew he'd get him sooner or later. It's the B-rank villain, Binder. Cashin is surprised by this, but the villain says it's useless. He says Cashin will never break free since it's not just his body that's trapped, but the desires within him. As fellow Darkness attribute users, struggling is a waste of time. But Moros calls out to Cashin. Binder tells him to remain trapped in inescapable despair and experience hell. The other villains advance, saying they're going to take his life. Pointer says he'll turn him into a kebab. Cashin just grabs the spear with his bare hand. Everyone is stunned. Iron Mask shouts that for the peace of his Vil Zone, he will defeat this rebel, and then he uses execution of justice. Juk also rushes toward him saying the others did a good job, so take this to the gut. Cashin loses consciousness for a few seconds. Crush also lands a blow on his back. All the villains shout for them to take his life and stomp on him. The protagonist slowly starts to fall. Finally, Blackhand finishes him with a kick, screaming that he's an insect. Kong-Wu asks if this is the best he can do, calling him a weakling. I took over your body and this is all you can manage? You really deserve to die. Cashin starts to emanate more energy, repeating his own name in his mind. All the villains are surprised by the energy, and even Moros is shocked. Cashin had even more power coursing through his body. The other villains fly towards the building. Crow asks if he's worrying too much about it. She asks what could go wrong, while Driver says it'd be good if everything went according to plan today. He adds that it would be problematic if too many people got hurt. All the villains then feel Cashin's energy. Driver is surprised and says it looks like something has gone very wrong down there. Juk asks what the hell that is, and the other villains do the same. They come face to face with Cashin, who is radiating extreme amount of dark energy. Binder says he's managing to break free. Jwack advances, saying there's no need to be afraid. They just need to crush him once and for all. But the protagonist shifts his gaze. He cuts all the threads, creating several dark blades on the ground. This completely severs all of Binder's threads and lifts the villains off the ground. One of the blades comes close to hitting Jwack. The same happens to Blackhand and Crush. All the villains are thrown to the ground while Cashin remains standing. Juk says that was insane. The protagonist declares that in order to fulfill his revenge, he can't die here, shouting in anger. Driver arrives at the building, and Crow asks if that's the Dark Horse. The villain then comments that his mana points have exceeded 2,000. Crow is surprised, and Red Eye says it's unbelievable. Those who exceed 2,000 mana points are considered catastrophe class. Crow asks what they're going to do, as it could end badly if they leave him like this. Driver just watches in silence. Moros shouts for Cashin to control himself, asking if he's really going to give in to irrationality. And where is that warrior spirit you're so proud of? Wake up. The protagonist replies that he is awake. He sighs arrogantly at the spirit. He asks if it thought he wouldn't be able to regain his sanity just because he lost control. His mental resistance wasn't that weak. He presses the DSP point. Moros notices this right away. He says it must be thanks to the device Red I gave him. Driver comments that he managed to control himself, but Crow thinks it's a shame as it would have been a good chance to see his full power. The villain then analyzes him with his glasses. Now compared to his mana points before, it had been reduced to less than half. He wonders if he only got strong because he lost control. Moros asks if he's okay, and the protagonist says he's just a little dizzy. But he then raises his eyes, asking if they want to continue the fight. Duet grinds her teeth and calls him a bastard, but Black Hand announces that they surrender. They've lost. The woman asks what gives him the right to do that. She says he should give up on his own since he's the loser. Black Hand grabs her by the collar. He lands a punch right after shouting that's enough. He was ashamed of having ganged up on him, and now she won't even admit defeat. He asks if she really wants to drag what little pride they have left through the mud. Jue K calls him a bastard. Black Hand says that if she wants to fight so badly, she should ask the boss just as Driver arrives on the scene. Jue K calls out his name. Cashin approaches him. Driver announces that the victory is his and congratulates him for passing the test. Cashin shifts his gaze to him, asking if he's satisfied now. Driver says, of course, and that he's now part of the family. The protagonist breaks into a smile. He announces that now that he's with his family, he's going to take a carefree nap. He falls asleep in his arms right after. At Philadelphia International Airport, an American flag is unfurled. Yuri asks if he slept, but gets no response. She thinks it's about his bedtime anyway. A man with a welcome sign smiles at her. Yuri realizes it's her manager as the man continues to smile at her. In the car, he introduces himself as Sean, the senior manager, and asks if she wants to go straight to her accommodations. Yuri thanks him for the suggestion and says that's fine with her. She wants to know what kind of person the hotel manager is. Sean replies that he's a charming person, but he's on a trip right now so she can only meet him in 10 days. But she should feel free to ask anything. Yuri just thanks him, announcing that from now on, she'll do her best. In the past, at the HC orphanage, Cashin says he's going to become a hero just like Jeff. The young man asks if he hadn't said he was going to become a cool villain. Cashin says that was just something he said when he didn't know any better. Jeff calls Cashin's name. He asks why he wants to become a hero, and the protagonist says he's inspired by him is always fighting for justice. Jeff says he's really just a kid, but he should listen carefully. Not all heroes are on the side of justice. Cashin asks if they aren't supposed to defeat the evil villains, and Jeff confirms. The boy then asks who is on the side of justice, if it's the villains. Jeff thinks for a few seconds. He says it's a person who fights for justice. He shouldn't blindly believe in anything he thinks is obvious. What he believes to be just might actually be the complete opposite. So he should, in fact, become someone who fights for justice. He gives the boy a smile. Moros calls the protagonist, and Cashin regains consciousness. He was in Driver's warehouse full of tools. Cashin then asks where he is, and Moros says he's finally awake. The protagonist asks if he was the one calling him, but the ghost is confused. Driver then calls out to Cashin, saying she thought he was asleep, but it seemed he had finally woken up. She smiled at him while Cashin was still confused. At the Korean Republican branch of Lampas, Woo Chan walks to his room. He knocks 3 times, congratulating his son Bai on his quick discharge from the hospital. But Dae Woong was slumped on the floor in defeat. Woo Chan then turns on the lights. He asked what he was doing with the lights off. Dae Wong just calls out to his student. He says he can't hear his Sword of the Great Bears and 4 Tigers. Wu Chan asks what he's talking about, and the hero shouts that it's as if the sword has lost its soul, its life force gone. He's never known this to happen and is sure Blood Rain must have done something. Wu Chan just watches in surprise. At the Paradise Bar, Driver says it's the best restaurant in the Ville Zone. To celebrate him passing the test, the food was on him. Cashin asks if this is the only place they can go. Driver says this way they can help boost Che's sales. Besides, he made sure to punish those involved in the incident during the test. Cashin remembers everything that happened. Che brings a dish, saying it's on the house. Cashin is surprised by this. He asks if this place is always so generous, but Che replies that it's to celebrate him becoming the chief of the Gadam district. Cashin questions this, and Driver explains that he defeated several strong villains on his own and that he forfeited their fight. The protagonist mentions he's already refused the chief position before because he hates annoying things. Driver tells him he'll handle the annoying work and pay him a monthly salary. Cashin says he'll be a figurehead chief then, and Driver says he wants him to become the new head of the Ville Zone. They need someone with his strength and charisma. Cashin comments that people wouldn't follow him so easily and would think he's a monster. But Driver says that while many were against the decision, he has faith in what he can do and nothing will change his mind. He is sure this is the right choice, catching Cashin's attention. He remembers the conversation he had with Cashin that day. The protagonist looks at his orange juice. Driver says he doesn't have a villain name yet and he's been thinking of one. The protagonist replies that it's Cashin, surprising everyone. He reflects that the high-class hero, Cashin, no longer exists. From now on, he is the villain seeking revenge, announcing that his villain name is elsewhere in the district. Cashin looks out at the landscape. He remembers the day Yuri got on the plane. Moros had asked if he was worried about his older sister. Cashin says it's not like anything is going to happen. Moros says he hadn't asked until now. But he wants to know if power was the reason he joined the villain zone. So Cashin says that gaining power is also good, if you have competent allies by your side, but before that, you need to get stronger. The more he moves, the stronger he gets, and the more he uses his abilities, the more he gets used to them. He doesn't know if it's the potential of a catastrophe-class villain, but because of it, he even managed to get dual attributes, which he had never heard of before. Then he extends his hand to the sky. He announces that if he trains properly, he can achieve the first step of his revenge. Moro says they could even find the exterminator sword that Jeff was trying to find. He asks if he had really forgotten about that. Back in the present, Cashin looks over the district. He comments that he really has become the chief of the villain zone at Siowa Arts High School in the Gadam district. In the first-year classroom, some girls are gossiping. Na-yoon sips some strawberry milk. She then asks what they're looking at, and the girls say it's news from the villain zone. The girl recognizes the protagonist thinking it's that guy. The girls say he's apparently the new chief of the villain zone, and as scary as he is, Wu Chan would beat him with a single punch. Na-yoon just thinks about it, wondering if he really is the chief of the villain zone. Elsewhere in the city, Crush tells him to forget it because it's annoying. Blackhand wants to know who made that horrible ranking of villains you wouldn't want to meet in the Gadam district. Crush says he's just pissed he's not on it, but the villain denies it. Then his friend says he was in 6th place. Doubleblade says that's not right, and Blackhand shouts that it's rigged. That villain wants to know why he chose Cashin as his villain name. Crush says he had noticed that too since he was a high-class hero. Blackhand asks if there's really a guy with that name. Crush says he was very famous, but the villain says he doesn't care about heroes and wants to crush that bastard with his fists. Doubleblade explains that he died recently. He was stabbed and lost his life for taking the life of an ally. Crush says that might be why the floating superstition. If you use the name of a dead hero as your name, you can gain new strength. Blackhand asks what the hell that is. He says it's really stupid, and Crush says many villains do it. And if you look around the villain zone, you'll probably find a few. Blackhand asks if this idiot is one of them, but Doubleblade suggests they don't fight since they just got out of the punishment room. He wonders if it's just a coincidence that the name is the same, and if not, he mentally repeats the words "a new power" in the training area in the basement of the villain zone. Cashin comes out of a shower saying he feels refreshed. Moros says that today he did double his usual training. He wants to know if his body can handle it if he keeps up this pace, but Cashin tells him not to worry as his training was within his limits. His condition has changed compared to before. He thinks his body changed after he went berserk that time. Moros reflects on this for a moment. Driver knocks on the door of the room. He asks if he can come in. Cashin says he'll be right out, while Moros warns that he's not in his villain mode right now. He walks with Driver. Driver asks if he does nothing but train all day, but Cashin tells him to get to the point. Driver says there's an emergency meeting, and the protagonist asks if he needs to be there and what it's about. But Driver tells him that those who were confined to the room have escaped. Escaping was a problem, but the place they went, it was the Boxen villain district. In a building, a villain says he screwed everything up and barely managed to get it back, yet he still dares to show his face. She looked all beat up now. Another woman says that in any case, with the change of the district's king, the conceited Driver is now obsolete. Then the villainess puts a cigar in her mouth, warning them to give her a week to take over the Gadam district, revealing herself as the S-rank Barracuda. Driver explains that there are about 400 villains in the Gadam district. Among them, 100 are actual villains, and the rest are either bums or homeless. Because they live alongside villains, they might be far from standard now in the villain zone's meeting room. Driver says that regarding Jwack and Pointer, who escaped from the punishment room, it's been confirmed that they are working together. And after their escape, their destination was the boxing villain zone. Cashin summarizes that there are 4 villain zones within Seoul and wants to know why they would go to that one. Driver says they don't get along with them. Those guys have been waiting for an opportunity to attack the Gadam district for a long time. And even after several polite warnings, they just ignore the situation. Cashin nods his head, asking if the chief of the Boxen villain zone is Barracuda. Red Eye says he's an S-rank villain with a violent and aggressive personality who's always looking for a fight. Driver says not to be scared just because he's S-rank, since he's a guy who uses items. Barracuda's fangs are his most prized weapons, and there's a rumor he uses a real magic crystal. Cashin reflects on this information. Driver says they outnumber them, and the problem isn't just the numbers but the high-rank villains. Red Eye says if those guys plan to attack them, he's sure they have plans. But Driver says that although they are known for that, they can't attack without reason. They just have to come up with a plausible reason and attack them. Crow says it's because all the villains in the Gadam district are incompetent. So instead of everyone, they will take the lead. Driver mentions there have been incidents like this before, but it's not like they're going to lose anyway because they have a valuable and reliable secret weapon. Driver asks where he was going, and Cashin says he was heading home. Midterms were coming up, and he has to study. Crow questions this, and Red Eye doesn't get it. Elsewhere in the city, at a coffee shop, a young man says it's been half a year since they last saw each other, and that they should meet up from time to time. Wu Chan replies that he never ignored his messages, and the young man answers that he never reached out first. Seo Ji-ho, the support class, notes that it's already fall and graduation is getting close. He asks if he'll become an active hero or go to college, and Wu Chan says it's probably the first option. Ideally, he'd like to be able to go to various places and build his own personal experience. Ji-ho says that, in that case, he should have chosen a training academy instead of a regular school. Wu Chan replies that it was what his father wanted. His friend just stares at him in silence. But he says that if he becomes an S-rank hero like his late father. But Wu Chan interrupts, saying that's not enough. He needs the title given to the 30 strongest in the world. The goal is to become a first-class hero. Wu Chan sips his coffee, declaring that then he'll be able to get his revenge on those bastards. Ji-ho thinks about this for a moment, but he points out that for the first class, aside from his magical power rating, he'll be evaluated based on combat skills. This goal is nearly impossible for a support like him, but Wu Chan replies that there's already a support class among them. But enough with the whining. If it's him, becoming a first-class hero is possible. He captured the A-class assassin, Blood Rain, and achieved something incredible. Wu Chan remembers what really happened. Ji-ho says that after the Blood Rain incident, many students started looking up to him as a role model. Wu Chan then looks at his phone. He says he needs to meet his sister and asks if Ji-ho would like to come along. Ji-ho says it's been a while since he's seen her too. Meanwhile, the protagonist walks past the coffee shop as there's a book he wants to buy. In the villain zone of Boxen District, Barracuda walks towards the punishment room of the villain zone. Someone calls out for their beautiful toys, asking where they took his toys and if they want to play hide and seek. But upon hearing the door open, he asks who's there. Barracuda replies that he took the toys away. The man says that if he's provoking him, he'll rip his tongue out. Barracuda approaches, saying he'll give him a new toy, grabbing his chin and saying he'll find out when he goes to the Gadam district. The man says that's his hometown. Barracuda asks if he's forgotten about Driver. The man says he was the boss of the Gatam villain zone, calling him a friend so beautiful he'd want to tear his eyes out. Barracuda says he's not the boss anymore. Then he removes all restraints, telling them to go to the Gatam district. There will be fun toys waiting for them. The man keeps a terrifying smile on his face. Elsewhere in the city, Na-eun calls out for Min-young, saying she was right behind her. She asks if she waited long, but Min-young says she just got there. Na-eun then comments that she was surprised when she called from an unknown number. Min-young says she changed her number as soon as she got out of the hospital because she wanted to forget everything that happened. They walked through the city. Na says her older brother was at the library, so they decided to meet there. Min-young then takes out a gift, saying this was for Wu-chan because she's the sweet type who always repays kindness. Later, at the city library, Na-yeon smells an old book. Min-young asks what she's doing, and the girl replies that she loves the smell. She liked the smell of new books too, but there's a book she wants to buy, and she'll find it quickly and be right back. Min-young asks what book she was looking for. Na-yeon says it's a cookbook her brother wants. Her friend becomes interested in the subject right away, shouting that she had found it. As she reaches for the book, Kang-woo pulls it from the shelf. Neon says, "Excuse me, I saw it first," but the protagonist says his hand touched it first. He then looks down, recognizing Na-eun and thinking she was that girl from before. It looked like she was doing okay now. Then he says she can have it. Kang-woo walks away while talking to Moros, telling him not to worry, as there should be more in stock if they ask an employee. Na-eun is left speechless. Elsewhere in the city, the blonde guy hits a punching bag, saying it's his new record. The nerd says he's a freak for that. Kai-hoon complains that this is too boring, so the nerd asks what he's doing. The guy says there's nothing fun to do. Someone approaches and asks if he was looking for something fun. Kai-hoon stands up and asks who it is. The person says he's going to give him a special gift, doing it because it's funny watching him look for something fun to do. Asking why he's so scared, Kai-hoon recognizes the villain. He asks if he doesn't like it and says he can refuse if he wants, so the guy tries to, but the villain rejects his refusal because that wouldn't be any fun. Then he places the gift on his head saying he's sure he'll like it. Kai-hoon falls unconscious for a few seconds, then a face opens on his gift. The villain says he's turned into a cute toy and asks why they don't play with some toys together. He's the rank toy maker back at the library at the same time. Neon calls for her older brother, letting him know she's there. Wu-chan asks why she was just standing around waiting when they could have met at a cafe. Na-eun says there's a book she wants to buy, and it was the simple cookbook she was looking for. Wu-chan says he just mentioned it in passing and thanks her, but Ji-ho comments it's his first time seeing this in real life. The hero in training asks if Min-young has recovered, and the girl thanks him. Na-yeon says that she has a gift for him. It's a gift for saving her the other day. Elsewhere, an employee apologizes. The book he mentioned was sold out, and they were out of stock. Kang-woo turns around upon hearing a noise. Ji-ho asks what's happening. The city ground begins to shake. Wu-chan realizes what's going on. Kang-woo also turns around, then they yell for everyone to get down as the library's windows shatter. Wu-chan asks what that was. The TV-headed Ki-hoon stirs, watching everyone with a strange expression. In the villain district, Driver tightens some screws, muttering about the midterms. He must be busy studying, but suddenly, there's breaking news. We're receiving reports that monster-like humans wearing gift boxes have appeared in the Gatam shopping district. Police suspect this is an attack. We're now going live to a reporter on the scene. Driver mentions a gift box. Crow says he was watching the news at that exact moment. So he thinks it's nothing other than the work of that bastard, that crazy bastard who ran away after getting beaten up 3 years ago. Back in the shattered library, the group of heroes gets ready to fight. Ji-ho asks what that is and if it's a villain, but the monster with a gift for a head just smiles menacingly. Suddenly, presents emerge from its box. Several plushies pop out from the top of its head, heading towards the group of heroes. Wu-chan punches one of them. Ji-ho does the same without using his powers. Another plushie lunges at Neon from behind, then it starts releasing bubbles. The girls scream, but suddenly, the plushie's face is hit. Kang-woo takes it down using a book as a weapon. Neon thanks him for that. The protagonist looks down, noticing it's just a doll. The monster starts screaming to release more plushies. Ji-ho says it looks like more are coming. Wu-chan says they'll take it down and tells him to just provide cover. Villains need to be eradicated, period. But Kang-woo tells him to stop, asking if he was planning on taking a civilian's life. Kong Wu explains that this civilian is a puppet being used and controlled, a hostage taken by the villains. Jiho questions this, wondering how he could know. Kong Wu advises that the fundamental rule for all heroes is to ensure civilian safety, so he must think rationally and maintain his composure. Wu-chan wonders how this guy knows the basic rules. Kong Wu shouts for him to look ahead because there's no time. The monster lunges forward with its fist ready. Wu-chan moves quickly, dodging backward. Jiho tells his friend to get away from that guy. He then releases his energy. Wu-chan thinks that if this guy with the gift box on his head isn't a villain and is really a controlled puppet disguised as a civilian, then he uses his ability on him, activating the power to restore people. The box starts to vanish from his face. Ki-hoon returns to his normal form. Jiho questions if it actually worked. Min-young says that Appa is so cool. Kong Wu says he wasn't a villain and that he was right. Ki-hoon finishes returning to his normal form. Jiho says he's back to normal, realizing that's his power. Na-eun asks what he was doing. Wu-chan then falls silent. All across the city, everything was being destroyed by the puppets with gift box heads. The plushies were attacking normal people. The toymaker says that everyone was having fun. He then starts to think, saying that someone broke one of his toys and he should go give them a beating. He thinks he'll find him where he's hiding. But Driver appears and says he's not going anywhere. The toymaker turns with a smile on his face. Driver says he had given him a warning if he caused any trouble in the Gadam district, but the villain says he doesn't know and doesn't need to listen to those words. Biting his lip, he repeats how happy he is to see him again, wanting to see his brilliant eyes again because he's gonna rip them out himself. He then charges forward, laughing as he advances relentlessly. Driver just pulls his weapon back, using it for a thrusting attack. He then repeats his comment about the puppets because they were getting on his nerves, and he wasn't the least bit happy to see this again because he might end up getting truly angry. In the boxing villain zone, the news was on TV, but Barracuda comments that it wasn't enough. The beginning should have been more glamorous and exciting, so the bastards from the Gadam district could have more fun. A rank rock hand asks why they don't just force their way through and destroy everything in their path. A -rank ice demon says he'll take anything as long as he can freeze everything. Barracuda says he doesn't give a damn, but they're not to touch the operator because he's his target. The woman behind him says she's taking the tastiest one. A rank smoker asks if he can have crow since he's been craving chicken lately. He wants to know what smoked crow would taste like. The person behind him asks if he can choose whoever he wants since he's interested in the person called Cashin. This is a +rank black ghost. Smoker says it's strange that a guy has caught his interest, and Barracuda says he's talking about the new leader. He tells him to do as he pleases, and Black Ghost thanks him for it. Smoker asks what he's going to do about the toymaker, but Barracuda says he was going to get rid of him anyway. His role was just to start the festival. A smile spreads across his face because this time, he would definitely get his hands on Gadam. In another corner of the city, a puppet with a gift box head runs forward, screaming. It heads toward the civilians, throwing its plushies, but new abilities approach, hitting it in the head. Jiho announces that the rescue is complete. That was the third person. They need to catch the villain before there are more victims. Jiho says that going after them is too dangerous. He's already called for backup, so they should just wait. But Wu-chan replies that if they delay, the villain will go crazy. He must be the madman from the rumors, the one called the Toymaker. Wu-chan says he's seen his history in Gadam's villain registry before. He was a dangerous guy who does anything for the sake of pleasure. Elsewhere in the city, Kong Wu looks at his phone. Moros asks if something happened. The protagonist explains that Driver had called. The main culprit behind the situation is the guy called the Toymaker. Moro says this is problematic. Kong Wu says he's leaving, but Moro tells him there are too many eyes around. The protagonist says he just needs to slip away. Na-eun asks where he's going, and Kong Wu replies that he's going home. The girl replies that it's dangerous to go anywhere alone, and Min-young agrees since her older brother is a hero. Moros thinks it won't be as easy to escape as he thought. Kong Wu thinks this is difficult, but then he notices something. The villain is advancing from above with a gift in his hands. Kong Wu saves the two of them with a leap, telling them it's dangerous. Then he turns back. Everyone is impressed, and the Toymaker says he's fast. Wu-chan runs toward his sister, but the Toymaker lands firmly on the ground, saying that they are the ones who broke his toys, and he's going to teach them a lesson. Jiho questions this, and Wu-chan says that he came to them. The Toymaker says he's happy to be recognized and will give them a reward. He's going to show this present just for him. He says it's a rare item as he runs. Wu-chan prepares a blast of fire in his hand. The toymaker stops right after. The hero shoots his flame, but the villain just licks his lips, throwing his present through the flames. A fish plushie comes out from inside, preparing a blast of water, which forces Wu-chan to stop the fire to defend himself. Na-eun screams for her older brother. Wu-chan hits the wall. The toymaker runs toward him saying he found him. He then starts laughing hysterically. Wu-chan thinks this is crap, but a cell phone hits the toymaker's head. The villain turns asking who's trying to spoil his fun, but the other side of his face lights up. As Wu-chan readies his fist of flames, hitting the villain square on while yelling for him to take this, the toymaker is thrown far away, crashing hard onto the asphalt with a few tumbles. Wu-chan asks what that was, noticing the cell phone. He says it looks familiar because it's his. Kong-woo asks if he saw that, and Moros agrees. Na-eun had thrown the phone toward her brother. The protagonist is surprised to see the mana curve. He reflects that she isn't that far from awakening, but all the heroes there realize something. After all, that toymaker was just a puppet. A loud laugh is heard from the end of the street. The toymaker says they're naughty, acting so indifferent even when his toys are destroyed like this, but it's alright anyway. He still has many fun toys to use. At the Lampase branch in South Korea, Dae-woong runs in saying he had to use the bathroom. His colleague complains that it's a disaster, and because of him, Wu-chan is in trouble. The hero says that Sunbai got a new car, and she tells him to shut up and get in. Elsewhere, the hero explains that this attack is happening in the central district of Gadam. As time passes, the damage will continue to increase since that district has an unstable population. This is a plus-rank Ham Ji-sun. Dae-woong asks if the toymaker is back, as expected. Ji-sun asks if he's only just figured that out. His partner Kim Woo-chan reported it and asked for reinforcements. Dae-woong then asks if he's there alone now. Ji-sun says it must be a relief, but the hero apprentice Ji-ho is with him. So Dae-woong says he should call and tell them not to do anything reckless. But his Sunbai warns that she's already told them to hide until they arrive. It'll be complicated if they act rashly like they did with the Blood Rain case. No matter how you think about it, this situation is suspicious. That guy disappeared 3 years ago and just came back out of nowhere. He was someone they couldn't understand, and he probably just got tired of hiding somewhere. This isn't just happening in Seoul. Movements like this are popping up in every zone across the country. It's as if someone is trying to start a conflict, and it looks like the zones are fighting each other. If there's some bastard who wants to control all the villain zones, then he's the one who stands to gain from this. Dae-woong says Wu-chan's phone was off, and Ji-soon tells him to call again. The hero complains that he's not picking up and that something must have happened to him. In another part of the city, a drone flies overhead. Driver watches everything from above. A gift from the toymaker flies by as he laughs, saying they should have as much fun together as they can and play until they lose their lives. He fires dozens of them at the group of heroes. Wu-chan runs, destroying each one with his fists. He then strikes one of the last gifts. Several plushies burst out from inside it, pinning the young man's arm. Wu-chan freezes at this, and the toymaker says he's won a unique item, the stickies. You're going to become the most amazing toy. This is great. Other pieces are launched at the young man. Kong-woo yells at the blue-haired guy demanding to know what he's doing, saying he should use his abilities on Wu-chan. Ji-ho quickly realizes this, and the toymaker says there's no chance of that. Then the hero uses his restoration power. The toys begin to dissolve. The toymaker screams, trying to deny this fact, telling him to stop ruining his toys. Wu-chan stops him with an elbow strike, throwing the villain towards the wall. He then moves his fist once more. But the toymaker dodges every blow, grabbing him by the neck and saying, "Gotcha. This is a super rare item. You should be honored to become one of my toys." However, a shadow blade strikes his hand. Then several shadow ropes form behind him, binding the toymaker's hands, who wonders what's happening now. Wu-chan uses the flames in his fist once more, striking the villain while asking, "Who's the toy now?" He throws the villain far away, calling him a bastard. The toymaker is knocked unconscious. Ji-ho then calls out to Wu-chan. The young man looks at the shadow blade, remembering that it belonged to the protagonist. Driver was watching from the top of the building. He then scratches his face, saying he'll pretend he didn't see anything. At his home, Wu-chan is watching TV. The news is reporting a commotion in the Gadam commercial district yesterday afternoon. The reporter asks if it was confirmed that the villain toymaker was behind it. Ji-soon says that due to the horrors committed, there were several injuries. The journalist asks what she thinks is the cause of the crimes committed by Gadum's villains. The heroine says it was a place made to show that control is possible. Statistically, cities with villain zones have a lower crime rate than cities without them. He concludes that the recent wave of crimes committed by villains in the Gadum district was a result of negligence in the villain zone. The journalist thanks her for the interview and says he believes there needs to be a reconstruction and that further measures must be taken. If the heroes hadn't taken an active role in these incidents, there would have been more casualties. He also heard that the apprentices Woo-chan and Ji-ho played a big part. He asks if she thinks they deserve the spotlight as they are the rising stars of Lampas in South Korea. Ji-soon says there are also rumors about shortening their time as apprentices. Woo-chan turns off the TV thinking. Dae-woong says he's proud of his partner. Woo-chan remembers all the times that damn villain saved people and wonders why he was doing it. On top of that, he looks at his phone. His name was Cashin, remembering that he was also his idol. Elsewhere, Aroma comments that this has gotten really complicated. She eats a cookie from her hand. Wong says there's even a specific group that wants to invade the zone and has been encouraging the media. Driver asks if the other zones have said anything, but Wong says they've been quiet. This would happen to them in the future anyway. Driver says that, in other words, they know it was planned, so that makes them the first sacrifice. He asks if Gadum seemed that easy. Wong says he's willing to help if needed, but Driver replies that he's just bragging about something he's obligated to do. But they have an invincible secret weapon, and Wong wants to know why he wasn't there. 8 comments that you can't even smell him, and Aroma talks about that piece of trash. Driver says he's taking his midterms right now. All 3 of them question this. At Gadum High School, Kang-woo is on the rooftop telling Yuri on the phone that everything is going well. He's also eating well and cooking, so she shouldn't worry and should just take care of herself. Yuri asks how she could not worry since something happened in Gadum yesterday. She wants to know if he was where it happened, and Kang-woo replies that he was at home studying for his exams. Yuri says it's almost time for midterms, and the protagonist says they start today. He's done his best so far. Yuri says he should indeed do his best because results are what matter. Then Woo-chan appears behind the protagonist. Kang-woo says he needs to use the restroom and that they'll talk later. He then faces Woo-chan, who simply calls out his name, at Yuri's restaurant in America. Yuri wonders if he was nervous because of the midterms and thinks she should have told him there's anxiety medication in the drawer. But Sean calls for Miss, saying there she is, as he couldn't get a hold of her. Yuri replies that she was talking to her brother and asks if something happened. Sean replies that's not why he was looking for her, but the general manager is back from his business trip. He was eager to meet Yuri, so instead of going straight home, he came to the restaurant. In the manager's office, Sean opens the door announcing he's coming in. The man is staring out the window until he notices they've arrived. Sean says he's brought manager Yuri with him, and the girl wonders if this is the general manager. The man introduces himself as Vincent and says it's a pleasure to meet her. Back on the rooftop, Kang-woo asks if he has something to say. Woo-chan closes his eyes and thanks him for yesterday, saying they would have been screwed without his help. The protagonist wonders if he came just to thank him. Woo-chan says that in that critical situation, he calmly assessed the situation and circumstances, then acted without hesitation. He adds that he should learn from him, and on top of that, he hands him a bag. Kang-woo wonders what it is. Woo-chan says his sister told him to give him this because she wanted to repay him for yesterday's help. For his information, besides himself, she's never given a gift to a guy before. It was hard to get this, so he'd better like it. Then he starts to leave, asking if, by the way, yesterday during the incident, he had seen a man in black clothes. But he changes his mind, telling him to forget it and wishing him good luck on his midterms. Moro says there's something inside, and Kang-woo comments that he has to open it to see what it is. He's surprised to see a basic cookbook in the villain zone of Gadum district. Driver walks with Crow. He comments that they're going to set up a barricade there. Hammer Boy says to leave it to him, and Driver replies not to forget that it has to be strong. And in front, they'll dig a trench. So Dirt Dog asks how deep they need to dig. Crow asks if the boxing guys are really coming, and Driver replies that he's sure they are, and that's why he's giving it his all. They wanted an audience for their declaration of war. Then he asks how Cashin's midterms went. Hammer Boy uses his hammer reinforcement. Dirt Dog activates his master excavation skill. Cashin asks what's going on, and Driver replies that he's in the middle of preparing in case of an enemy attack. Besides, there are only 13 of them, and if they're well prepared, they can overcome them. Driver asks where he's going, and Cashin replies that he's going to meet Yuchai. Driver asks if he's going to drink during the day, and Crow says they should go to her place to drink wine alone. Paradise Bar, the manager cleans a glass. Yuchai asks if he wants to buy high-quality magic stones and how many, but Cashin wants all of them. The guy asks if he can even pay, mentioning he'll count it out now, but they don't accept promissory notes. Cashin asks how many he has. Yush thinks for a few seconds. He says he was giving it his all and that it wasn't a fake bank card. He'll show the items first and asks him to please follow him into the warehouse. Cashin stands before a huge staircase leading down. Inside, Yush opens a box. He announces that he has 5 high-quality magic stones in his possession. Cashin remarks that's not as many as he imagined. The price was written on the transaction form. As he knows, they're very expensive and the superior grade ones are exceptionally high quality. Cashin replies that he'll buy them all so he should give him a discount, but Yush says that's not possible. The protagonist tries to argue. This irritates the seller, who agrees to sell them all at the requested price, but in return, he must pay for everything up front. Cashin tells him to send the account details. Yesterday, he says he's the only one who knows about a secret Swiss bank account in Cashin's name. Moros asks if he had an emergency fund. Kongwu says Jeff told him to create one, just in case something happened. He then says he'd accessed it, and Moros is surprised. It was a truly considerable sum. Kongwu says if he'd known all this would happen, he would have put all his assets in there. Moros asks what he was planning to use this money for. The protagonist says he'll invest the money to increase his strength. Yuchai comments that it was a pleasure doing business with him, and that he should come back anytime. He then picks up his cell phone, wondering who this guy was to make such a large transaction all at once. Elsewhere in the city, Min Young asks what they should eat, and Naun says she loves mango parfait. They sit down and the parfaits are served. Min Young comments that it looks delicious, and Naun notes that there's a lot of mango. She then asks if she remembers where the person who saved them yesterday went, but Min Young says she doesn't. He probably just went home. Naun brings the mango parfait to her mouth. She starts to remember Kongwu running away from them. Min Young starts calling her friend's name several times. Then she asks what's wrong, seeing her drop the spoon. Naun realizes everything, thinking that he's the one. The girl says she's going to the bathroom, and Min Young tells her it's at the end of the hall. Naun starts walking while someone spies on her. Black Ghost watches her from a distance. The girl washes her hands, thinking that she's sure Min Young didn't see, and Appa didn't notice either. She wonders what would happen to him if she were to reveal his identity. Suddenly, an energy forms. Cashin appears behind her. Nian asks why he's there, but Cashin doesn't answer her. Back at the restaurant, Min Young wonders why she's taking so long and ignoring her messages, asking if she's on the phone with someone, but a scream can be heard from behind them. People run, screaming that it's a villain. Cashin walks forward, carrying Nan. Min Young calls out to her friend, noticing she can't move. Cashin asks if she is her friend. She should go and deliver a message to her brother. Tell him to meet them in the Gadam district's villain zone if he wants to see his sister again. Later, in the Gadam district, Blackhand asks what the hell happened here. Doubleblade comments it was preparation for when the guys from Boxen attack. Blackhand says they should attack first. He asks if they should go there alone, but Doubleblade tells him not to take another step as there's a trap on the ground. The guy asks about it, and his friend warns that Dirt Dog was bragging about his hard work. Crush notices something coming from a distance. Then he asks what that is. He wonders if that guy is Kim Woo-chan, but Blackhand doesn't know him and asks if he's a villain from the boxing district. Doubleblade shouts that he's a hero and has been trending on the internet recently. The guy yells that he's a psyker. He then unleashes the power in his fist, telling his friends to get out of his way because a hero shouldn't have the guts to come here, and he should just bring it on because he's going to make him regret stepping into the Vil Zone. Wu-chan prepares his power, telling them to get out of his way because he came here to find his little sister. But suddenly he missteps, wondering if it's a trap. An explosion happens right after. Blackhand asks what that was. He then stumbles and falls into the hole. Crush asks which one of them he's calling an idiot. In Cashin's personal training room, the young man finishes digesting the magic stones. He looks at his hand as the power manifests. Moros asks how he feels after eating 5 high-quality mana crystals, but Cashin says he feels the same every time and tells him to use the appraisal eye to check. His stats appear before him. Cashin comments that he had 860 mana points, which barely reaches the level of AB rank. Moros comments that the crystals aren't worth as much anymore. But it would be a different story if they could get their hands on a real crystal, and if he keeps eating these mana crystals like candy. Cashin says he'd rather train harder than keep eating a bunch of these crystals. Moros thinks that he knows, but he'll be happy to find out that his mana points grew absurdly the last time he got enraged. Cashin looks at his stats, questioning what this is, as there's a number after the skill name. Moro says that he used the 2 shadow blades when he fought Bloodrain. Just then, someone knocks on his door. Driver announces that someone wants to see him, and it's a guy named Kim Woo-chan. Cashin turns around, wanting to know more about this. In the box and villain zone, a drone flies overhead. Amidst the abandoned corridors, Black Ghost walks with Nan on his shoulders. He slowly releases his power. In the main room, Smoker wonders if he's arrived. Black Ghost appears in front of his boss. Barracuda cracks a smile. Black Ghost says he's going to put her in the prison, and Barracuda agrees. Smoker asks if he's planning to pressure and corner those goddamn villains. Barracuda says this will make things more fun. It will be on the news soon that Cashin was the bastard who kidnapped a hero's family member. It would be great bait for those reporters. They'll come running like a pack of hungry wolves. Barracuda says they will then distance themselves from those Gaddam bastards and become completely isolated, and that's when they would begin their attack in the Gaddam villain zone. Amidst the buildings, Cashin summarizes the situation while Wu-chan is tied up. He repeats that they said he kidnapped his little sister.
Question remember na.
He says it wasn't him as he doesn't do such crude things. Driver adds that it's true and there's no way he could have done it. It wasn't enough to kidnap someone. They had to frame him too. Those damn box and bastards used a dirty trick to screw them over. Wu-chan grinds his teeth, telling him not to lie. Then he screams, wanting to know where his sister is. Driver says they'll attack Buishuan later. So first, they need to fix this misunderstanding. Cashin tells them to untie him, and the others are surprised. The protagonist says they're going to clear up this misunderstanding. Wu-chan just keeps grinding his teeth. They watch the drone footage. Driver says it's a good thing they prepared beforehand. It's obvious this is all Barracuda's fault. Just in case they did something stupid, he sent a drone to Boxen. Crow comments that the quality is great. Cashin asks who that guy is, and Driver replies that it's probably Black Ghost since he has a transformation ability. The protagonist asks about it, and his friend replies that he transformed into him. Wu-chan thinks that it looks just like him. Cashin says, whatever. They found the culprit, and now they just have to beat him up. He was being accused of kidnapping. Wu-chan says this calls for an execution. If he's going to the Boxen villain zone, he should go with them because he needs to save his little sister. Driver says they won't go alone, and Crow comments that he's coming too. His friend replies that the preparation is more exciting than the invasion, and they'll attack Boxen today. Blackhand and his friends burst into the room saying they're going too. If they're going, they should go too since they want to have some fun as well. Cashin says he won't stop them from coming along, but there's something they need to resolve first. Driver repeats this, then looks at Wu-chan. The young hero is completely bewildered at the La Vie en Rose Hotel in the presidential suite. Wong says the jewels were magnificent. They're so beautiful. No matter how much he looked, they seemed priceless. Oat and Aroma say that guy is at it again, calling him trash. But Wong's phone rings. He asks what it is, saying he's busy with a work report, but he's surprised a moment later. The twins are surprised by him. Wong transforms, saying they are close. It's something he can really help with, and they should leave it to him in the villain zone of the Boxen district. Kong Wu stands with his arms crossed, asking if this is the Boxen district's villain zone. Driver says that now that they're here, there's no turning back. Before they go in, they'll go over the plan one more time. He calls him over, telling him not to just sit there like an idiot just because he's a rookie, telling Red Mask to get over here now. Earlier, Wu-chan holds the mask. Driver tells him to wear it if he wants to come with them. Wu-chan asks why. Cashin replies that a hero fighting alongside villains would be weird, and Driver adds that he made it as a joke, but that's how it's being used. If he doesn't want to start any weird rumors, he should do it. Driver states their target is the leadership of the Boxen district. Cashin says they'll save the hostage after defeating the leaders, and Crow comments that the plan is a checkmate with a small group. The The protagonist says to find the shortest route because the way to win this fight is a quick ambush. He's going to assign everyone's roles and positions. Driver will scout ahead, and Cashin will infiltrate to take out enemies with Crow providing cover. Wu Chun asks about CQB, and the protagonist continues, saying he'll be in charge of the rear. Crow asks what CQB is. Cashin says he'll now designate the group's objective, but Black Hand tells them to wait. He complains they were talking without them, as if they were just for decoration, while Crush says they should just go in and destroy everything in their path. Cashin replies that they have a separate important role. While they carry out the mission and return, the two of them will secure the escape route. Until then, they must not be captured and should hide well. The two start arguing about it, and Red Mask thinks about the asshole. He remembers when Cashin had said during hero training that the path to victory is a swift ambush. Then he touches Wu Chan's head. He said that he was a very talented kid and would be useful to him if he remembered that. Red Mask thinks that the villain was saying the same thing. On top of a building, the group prepares. Driver's drone flies over a camera, then it interfaces with it. It begins to take control of the camera and use it with his powers. Driver announces that targets number 10 and 11 are secure. All the front security cameras are under his control, and Crow comments that he's really cool. Cashin announces they're invading now, then they leap toward the building. Red Mask stays behind, thinking for a few seconds, but he jumps too, praying for his sister to be safe, vowing he'll get there fast to rescue her. In one of the district's rooms, Na-eun was unconscious on the floor. She suddenly starts to wake up, seeing that she's in a cell. She gets up at once, wondering what this place is and what's happening. But as she touches the floor, her power manifests. She remembers that person wasn't him and wonders how she knows, since she's sure she was unconscious. Footsteps are heard from the hallway. Outside, Black Hand shouts that he's furious. He says they don't need to protect an escape route, and Crush agrees. If you're a proud villain, you should shut up and go all in. Doubleblade asks if they can't just shut up. The reason they were excluded from the plan is because they can't stay quiet, but Black Hand yells that it's not his fault. Doubleblade reflects that this bastard really lives without thinking and says that before this, their boss is a little strange, and the others ask about it because earlier when he was explaining the plan, he gave off the vibe of a high-ranking hero. Black Hand asks what he means by that, and Crush says he wasn't yelling, but a voice shouts, wanting to know who's there. The villains recognize Jwack, and Crush thinks they've been caught. The woman asks what they're doing in the boxing district, as they shouldn't have a reason to visit. She immediately sizes them up, shouting that they came here to surrender to boxing. Black Hand asks what she means by surrender, telling her to stop talking shit. But a voice asks why it's so noisy as he approaches. All the villains freeze, recognizing the guy as Rock Hand. He says he's never seen these idiots before and asks if they came to spy on them so blatantly. Black Hand questions what he just called them. Jwack says they don't have the skills to do something that difficult and probably came to surrender. Black Hand asks what the hell she's talking about since he came here to take over boxing. Doubleblade thinks to himself that they were told to stay quiet and not get caught. Rock Hand says so. He's come to take over his district. It's reckless, but he acknowledges their courage, telling him to prove that extreme courage is stronger than a rock. Black Hand approaches, asking what that has to do with anything because his steel fists are stronger than any rock. In another corner of the building, Barracuda was sitting quietly in his room. He begins to think about the past when he was in the Gadam district. A younger driver asks if he wants to merge all the zones in Seoul and why. Barracuda says that if they join forces, they'd be stronger so they wouldn't have to live in hiding, wary of heroes, and to unite all the villain zones across the country and then the world. But Driver interrupts, saying he should do it alone, and he hopes he won't bring in rowdy kids just to satisfy his own needs. Barracuda asks what he's talking about. Driver says he's just doing his best to run away like those idiots who bully the weak, but whatever. He's against it, and those two seem to agree with him. Barracuda calls him an asshole. Driver points his tool at him, warning him not to try anything funny. The villain is startled by this, then his friend tells him to pay attention to what he's saying or he'll really get hurt. Back in the present, Barracuda stands up. Then he hears someone approaching. A girl says she's arrived with the report, and Barracuda asks what's happening. B-Rank Lens girl says she found some goddamn losers on the outskirts of their villain zone. 3 of them were found, and they all seem to be around B-Rank. Barracuda asks who was there, and the girl replies that it was Rockhand. The villain comments that he should be enough to handle them alone, but this is strange anyway. He tells her to search other places because he's sure those idiots are just bait. Driver wouldn't try such obvious tricks as they wouldn't work on him, calling for Barracuda's canine teeth because if other villains' own bosses come to fight him, he's sure he won't lose, not even to Driver. He shouldn't think he's the same man who was defeated before. On the other side of the building, Cashin asks if this is where the core members stay. He got there faster than he thought, and Crow says it was all thanks to her. Driver says that before they go in, they should check who's inside the building. His friend asks what that is, and he shows off the sub-miniature drone. Red Mask reflects that this guy will be a problem if he becomes an enemy, but a noise is heard behind them. Wu-chan asks what that was and if they've been discovered, but Cashin just comments that this is getting boring. Since it's come to this, he repeats his plan for a quick ambush. But suddenly, their vision grows hazy as smoke fills the area. Red Mask asks what it is, but a laugh can be heard. Smoker asks where they're hiding. Everyone spots her then. The woman says some lost rats are scurrying around, and even Driver came along with Crow, but neither of them recognizes her. Smoker says that since Driver belongs to the boss, she'll let him stay, but Crow is her opponent. The woman then breaks into a smile. He tells them to go on ahead, saying he'll take care of it. Driver asks if she wants to talk, but Crow says it's just a quick matter. And it's girl talk, so he shouldn't even dare to interfere. Cashin asks if it's okay not to help her, but Driver replies that she's having fun, so the group moves forward. Driver tells him to play with her for a bit and catch up later, but Crow just laughs. Her friend then leaves. A smile spreads across Smoker's face. She says that since the obstacles are gone, maybe they can enjoy this private time together. Crow repeats the word obstacles, saying she's delusional. They weren't obstacles, but her saviors, the ones who were going to save her. But since there's no one left to stop them, they should enjoy it to the fullest until they drop dead. Inside the building, they shout about intruders, ordering to kill them on sight. Cashin keeps running with the others, but he spots a group of villains coming at them. B+ rank Sharktooth yells to take all these guys down and to beat them senseless without any mercy, but Cashin vanishes in a blur of shadows. He takes down all those villains in a split second. He moves with a swift kick, striking one of the villains and slamming him into the wall. Sharktooth says he can definitely fight, but weak little punches won't have any effect on him since his body is incredibly tough, and he's going to take his life with a single bite, activating his prey hunt ability. But the protagonist stops him with a shadow blade between the villain's teeth. He uses the wall as a springboard and rushes towards the villain, landing a solid knee strike on him. This leaves Sharktooth completely unconscious and bloodied. The protagonist hits him one more time, smashing Sharktooth's face into the ground. The monster is left completely knocked out. Driver says he did well, while Wu-chan reflects on how strong he is. He looks through his mask because every time he sees him, he's more powerful. Cashin says they'll split up here. The operator and he will attack the Boxen leaders, and Wu-chan should save his sister since that's why he came. Driver says she's in the basement of a nearby building and the drone already has her location, so it shouldn't be too hard. Wu-chan clenches his fist in gratitude and then starts running off. Driver thinks he's a big brother who really loves his sister, but then he notices something. Another group of villains is attacking from behind, so he tells them to go on ahead without him as he'll take care of these small fry. If they linger, the number of villains will only increase and he also needs to wait for Crow to finish. Cashin says he'll trust him then and Driver says he'll catch up soon. So he stays behind with the villains. He brandishes his tool while saying that now they're gonna have a nice chat about everything that's happened. Back to the fight, Smoker says she's been irritated from the start and hates being treated the same way as her. So she uses her breath from beyond magic. Crow dodges the attacks with extreme precision using various acrobatics. Smoker uses her deadly breath ability against her. Crow then spins her staff. The crows open their mouths and manifest darkness. Then she uses her crow's hide and seek, which launches something. The smoke slowly starts to dissolve. Crow vanishes completely after that. She then places her staff on the ground saying that was nothing special and if she has nothing else to show, but she senses what's happening behind her. She turns and avoids a blow. One of the crows is caught in the attack and grunts. Crow immediately turns around, finding herself trapped in the smoke. Smoker says she's a poor thing because if she breathes even a little of that black smoke, her blood circulation will stop and her lungs will burn. She looks horrible for someone who was showing off like that. Crow says she has committed an unforgivable crime and the atmosphere changes. The woman manifests all her crow energy asking how she dares to do that to her precious babies, a gift from the love of her life. Smoker asks about her ability, which is dissipating, saying it makes no sense for a crow to have so much power. Crow warns that she is to blame for this and releases more abilities. From now on, she will be judged by the way of the crow. Suddenly, the woman's entire body is consumed by crows. On the second basement floor of the villain zone, Wu-chan keeps running to the room where his sister is. He thinks that these guys were being intentionally considerate and he owes them one now. But he grabs the controller and says he's close until he finds a path of ice at his feet. Wu-chan stops immediately. Ice Demon says he's never seen him before and wants to know if he's one of the guys from Gatham. It was a good idea to wait there as he knew at least one of them would come to rescue the hostage. Wu-chan unleashes his flames, telling him to shut up and get out of his way. Ice Demon says this is interesting as they have opposing abilities, which suits a hothead like him. Fire and ice would be an extremely interesting fight for him. Then they both unleash their abilities at full power. Outside, the crows fly as Smoker groans in pain. Elsewhere, on the 12th floor of the building, Cashin clenches his fists. He approaches the boss's room and tells him to stop hiding and show himself. Shadows begin to manifest in the area. Black Ghost says he has good senses and that he really wanted to meet him, a villain with the same attribute as his. Cashin asks if he was the one who kidnapped Non. Black Ghost replies that he researched him and achieved quite a feat, debuting as a villain at the same time. It was an unspoken taboo to fight another villain outside the villain zone, but he ignored that and kept fighting other villains. A public enemy, and even if his life were taken there, no one would be held responsible. Becoming a boss of this heresy's villain zone, and Kong Wu questions it. Black Ghost asks for forgiveness for his sarcastic tone as he didn't mean to offend him. He truly admires him. A true villain must truly go mad. They were all supposed to be outlaws. But a shy person who lives in the shadows like him can't even try something like that, and Moro's comments that he seemed to be praising him. Black Ghost says he wants to be just like him, not just a shadow, but to become darkness itself just like him. Moro's wonders if he's a stalker, and Cashin calls him a sick bastard. Black Ghost says he's talked enough and that's not like him, so they should begin. The protagonist pays attention, and the villain says he seems quite strong at close range. However, several other heads of himself appear. Cashin wonders if they are illusions, thinking there's no way all four can be real. Black Ghost charges forward announcing, "Here I come." The protagonist remarks that real or not, he will emanate his darkness. Because he's just going to get rid of all of them, he uses his shadow blade. Black Ghost is thrown back by the attack. But the protagonist had already reached his face, closing in immediately after. And then he lands a claw strike, but the assassin avoids it, running backward like a coward. Cashin asks if he's going to hide in the shadows. The smoke in the area begins to thicken. The protagonist notes that his speed is usually very good. Black Ghost reflects that he is much stronger than he originally imagined. And since that's the case, he prepares some kind of darkness ability. It then approaches a chandelier, shattering the only light still illuminating the area. Cashin is then left in complete darkness. Black Ghost tries to attack him from behind. Cashin turns around immediately. The villain says he figured that's how it worked, so he can't see completely in the dark. Cashin reflects that his voice is coming from every possible direction. Black Ghost says it's true they are both darkness users, but when he fights, he's a true assassin. That earlier attack was just a provocation. He's going to show him the horror of losing your life in shadows so dark you can't see a thing. Cashin repeats the word horror, saying he wouldn't know what it's like to sink into an abyss of darkness and the terror of waiting to die. Black Ghost is surprised by this because Cashin had become darkness itself. He says he has already experienced death and was then reborn, repeating the boy's words that he is darkness itself. On the second basement floor of the Barracuda's hideout, Na-yoon keeps touching her bars, wondering what that sound she's hearing is. The battle of ice and fire rages outside. Wu-chan dodges the ice attacks while fire energy emanates from his body. Ice Demon shoots his spell, Glacial Torrent, at him, but Wu-chan easily dodges all the blasts. Then he keeps running towards his opponent. He thinks he can't find an opening. It's one skill after another. He's a very experienced fighter. Ice Demon says he's doing better than expected. He thought he'd be more of a hothead, and if he had attacked directly, it would have been much easier. Thanks to that, freezing him will be much more exciting. He asks if Wu-chan gets more excited when he's burning things. It's the same for him. Freezing others is what gets him excited, but not all at once. He prefers to freeze a leg and an arm first, watching them tremble in fear as their limbs freeze solid. But Wu Chan breaks free, calling him a despicable villain. An ice demon questions it, because come to think of it, he doesn't sense any anger from him. And now that he thinks about it, he heard the hostage's older brother was a psyker. Wu Chan asks how he dares to compare him to that kind of trash because he was Red Mask, the strongest villain in Gatham. Then he charges forward, unleashing his fire ability. Ice Demon manifests more fragments with his hands, shooting the ice spikes at him. Wu Chan just shatters them with his fists, and then he closes in. Earlier, Wu Chan questions why Cashin called him aside. The protagonist says he'll get straight to the point. The pauses between his attacks are too long. What he means is that Wu Chan gets distracted while fighting. He can't emphasize this enough, but his judgment and actions need to be faster. Cashin uses dark combustion on a training dummy. Wu Chan is surprised by this. The protagonist says that speed is the essence of a technique. You can't give your opponent time to defend since the best defense is a good offense. Wu Chan wonders why he was saying these things. Cashin talks about mana compression, heat, and explosion. The ignition methods for those with abilities are different from those without. Whether you're a hero or a villain, you exist to get stronger. Then he gets closer, telling him to think outside the box. What he was saying is not to close himself off to new ideas.